He spots two girls ahead of him, grinning like they know a secret, and the panic hits. How in the world is a 32-year-old virgin trapped in a 10-year-old's body? Then one girl trails a finger across his cheek, while the other softly pats his head like she's comforting him. He feels insanely lucky right now, wonders what mysterious power he even got in this world, and can only assume it's the secret magic of cooking seasonings. One girl keeps stroking his hair with this sweet smile, while the other keeps jabbing her finger right at his face. He turns red, shivers through it, and there's no denying it. He's absolutely loving every second. A few days back, the boy barely cracks his eyes, first one, then the other, and there he is, sprawled in some clearing, muttering that he has to be preserved. Then he rockets upright and blurts out, stunned. He doesn't have a clue where he is. He only remembers working late yesterday, cramming onto the subway home at night, eating dinner like always, and then getting into bed as if nothing could possibly go wrong. Memories of his past and his usual life streaked through his mind. Then his body suddenly betrayed him. He stared at his hands, then his feet, disbelief all over his face, even testing them by grabbing and lifting. And finally, he hesitantly pressed his palms to his own face, whispering questions like something was seriously wrong. He stares at his new body, utterly stunned, and can't make sense of what's happening, because right when the main character notices how tiny he's become, he realizes he's 32. Yet somehow he's been turned into a kid, and even his clothes are different. The boy stares in shock because this can't possibly be a dream. It feels way too real, and he can't make sense of what's happening to him. Suddenly a wild idea sparks in his mind, and he thrusts his hand forward, ready to call the status. A sign snaps into view in front of him and declares, "Tatsuya, 10 years old, high elf, condition stable." His jaw drops. He can't wrap his head around it, because this is real, and somehow he's been thrown into another world, like it's just a game transfer. Before this life, he couldn't get enough of fantasy novels, always daydreaming that he'd end up inside one, and then memories of the books I'd devoured came rushing back. The main character snaps to the fact that this just can't be real, and then, out of nowhere, he spots something new hidden in the status screen. Tatsuya peers at his age, 10, and can't believe his results. He's a high elf now, and he realizes he's started at level 1. The main character is shaking with fear, screaming in his head that he has to stop and think. Then the truth hits him. He's weak. He blurts to himself, "I reincarnated, from 32 to 10, and somehow, even an elf?" Then he grabs his ears, checks the stories in the books, pointed ears and all, yet his ears don't change one bit. And right there, the main character is completely baffled, because he has no clue why any of this happened. He's got the first level, but his strength is still at 0, so he's totally exposed. He remembers how books and games usually kick off, and then Tatsuya realizes reality doesn't play fair, it's way more brutal. He can't shake that line about vulnerability, so the main character scratches his head at what it means. Then it hits him. He's a magician. Suddenly, Tatsuya spots a system window, and it calls a vulnerable magician, someone who hasn't had intimate relations in over 30 years. He's stunned to the core and blurts it out loud. If he hasn't hooked up in 30 years, boom, he's instantly branded a magician, and he swears he heard that exact rule before, because ever since the day he hit 30, he was basically destined to turn into an elf magician. Even though his body had turned younger, Tatsuya's mind stayed exactly the same, and that twist hits him as pure irony. He breaks down crying, tears of joy, wiping his face with his hand and whispering, "It looks like tears just kept pouring out of my eyes." Suddenly he spots something else, and his eyes lock onto a special skill in the system window. Cooking seasoning. He can't help it. What in the world is that? The system tells him his power is cooking up absolutely any seasoning there is, and she goes on about more skills and how to level up his mixes. Right now, at level 1, he only has soy sauce and sugar to work with. The main character freezes in shock because he has no clue what it even means to create seasoning as a skill. In his old life, he lived for cooking, and now those dishes slam back into his head as vivid memories. So he figures that's exactly why cooking became his special skill. Tatsuya snaps to attention. His magic isn't about luck anymore. It's all about those special spices he has to prepare. So he forces himself to reach out and blurts, shouting, "For soy sauce!" Suddenly, soy sauce gushes out of his hand, and he bursts into joy because he pulled it off. The jet slammed into the tree, right on target, and with a shaky voice, the boy snapped the magic to stop. He's thrilled the magic finally died down, yet he can't stop wondering how much of it is still trapped inside him. Then Tatsuya realizes the entire tree is drenched in soy sauce. Soy sauce still sloshes in his hand, dripping down in slow motion. Tatsuya snaps that it's stopped. The main character can't believe it. This skill fits housewives to a T, letting them cook up a storm and splash seasonings into every kind of dish, while the soy sauce keeps dripping off the counter onto the ground. He still can't wrap his head around how this skill is supposed to help him in a fight, so he freezes in confusion, then forces a grin, reassures himself anyway, and chuckles like an idiot at the fact he can at least make soy sauce. He snaps, annoyed and disappointed, saying that after 30 years of peace, he'll finally have to stay quiet and keep dodging trouble. Out of nowhere, he feels eyes on him, whips around, and there, right in front of him, Patsia locks eyes with a brutally evil wolf. The monster bares its teeth at him, and the main character blurts out in shock, realizing it's a wolf, then swears he must have wreaked it out. The guy finally snaps to it. He needs to run, but that wolf is still closing in, even if he sprints at full speed. Tatsuya figures his skill can't help in a real fight, but he'll still try to blast the wolf with this seasoning. Then the wolf snarls right back and growls at him. With terrified confusion in his chest, the main character realizes there's no way out, and he has to unleash a whole waterfall of soy sauce. He lunges in with his hand stretched out and smacks the wolf right in the face with soy sauce. The wolf springs into action, dodging the soy sauce like a blur, and the main character is left totally stunned as he scrambles backward. The wolf creeps up to the liquid, sniffs it in total confusion, then recoils in pure disgust. The animal skirts around the soy sauce like it's poison, refusing to get any closer, and the main character can't help but ask himself why it reacts so hard. Then he guesses the wolf's receptors must be dulled by the smell. Right then he halts mid-step, and for a split second, the sharp stink of soy sauce hits him, and he realizes it could lure even more monsters hiding out in the forest. A wolf snarls at him like a warning from the dark, and the main character's stomach drops as he realizes if more wolves show up, he's not surviving this. He tells himself, "I'm gonna have to hit that wolf again, or it's gonna turn on me." Then he grips his hand and prepares to unleash the soy sauce once more, eyes locked, forcing himself to aim dead on for the wolf's face. A raging wolf charges in with a furious roar and leaps at him, and Tatsuya snaps into action, realizing this is his one shot and he can't let it slip. He thrusts out his hand and hollers for soy sauce, and then the main character straight up dives into the wolf that rockets at him, loving every second of it. Under the brutal pressure of soy sauce, the wolf gets blasted and pinned to a tree by a jet, then crumples to the ground unconscious, mouth gaping, tongue hanging out. The boy creeps up to him, then stares at the fallen enemy's head, and with shock and wild joy, he realizes it all ended perfectly. Tatsuya somehow beats the guy with soy sauce, and then he blurts out that he has to escape fast before the other monsters crawl in. He abruptly cuts himself off and blurts that it's still amazing. Then the boy flicks his right hand and swings open the system window right in front of him, staring at it. His eyes go wide and his mouth drops as he realizes how someone can store things, and suddenly storage finally clicks, because he's seen this before. The main character thrusts his hand out, ready to trigger his storage skill and yank the wolf straight into a storage spot. The animal vanishes in a blink, and right where it was, a white sphere pops into place, then it whips around the same ring of white as if it's alive. And when the boy thinks he's losing his mind, she just hovers there, floating above the ground. The white orb and that matching ring blink out of existence. Then Tatsuya spots a wolf icon popping up in the storage area of one of the cells, and everything clicks for him at once. Now he can transform anything by stashing it at home, then pulling it back the other way around. Tatsuya thrusts his right hand forward, clamps down on his focus, and mentally shouts for the wolf to slam into existence in front of him. Suddenly, a wolf materializes in midair right in front of him, and the main character can't help but stare in shocked awe. Tatsuya catches it, grins, and thinks, "So you're just a wizard, and that's awesome." But the smile vanishes at once as his mind kicks into gear. Tatsuya can't believe it. He really pulled it off. With that sauce, he smashed the beast to pieces. The hero clamps his nose with his palm, glaring as that salty stink still hangs in the air, and he can only hope the rain will smash it all clean away. The main character creeps down a winding forest path, inching through a sea of towering trees and tangled bushes. He bursts out from behind the bush, snaps his eyes open in shock, and lets out a loud, shaky exhale. The boy spots a road that's a little crooked ahead, stretching straight into the far-off horizon, and he blurts out, shocked out of his mind. The main character stares into the horizon and, without hesitation, decides that a whole city lies out there. He says he has to land a job just to get a bed of his own, so he'll be stuck in this city for a while, but he brushes it off, convinced nobody will even notice the little kid. Suddenly he slams on the brakes and blurts out in shock. Then the main character chuckles, sheepish, saying he's still thinking about working, even here, even in another world. And somehow nothing changes as he keeps marching forward. After what feels like forever, he spots a massive gate ahead, standing between him and the city, where a giant round-shaped founding place of Fleacher looms right in front of him. Tatsuya steps up to one of the guards, unsure as he greets him, and the guard snaps his head back, stunned, asking what Tatsuya wants. Tatsuya steadies himself and says he came from a village looking for work. The smiling guard posted by the gate leans in and asks the boy his age, and the main character snaps back fast, blinking in shock. "I'm 30. The guy laughs like it's a joke, doesn't buy it for a second, then snaps back and says he's 10. He even looks a little embarrassed and holds out his hands to smooth things over. Tatsuya silently berates himself for almost blurting out his real age. The man says, "First, I've got to register with the Adventurers Guild before I even hunt for work." In Flitzia, there are crafts everywhere, but he's sure the guild will match him to a solid job he can actually pull off. The knight points him down the way and says the guild sits right in the heart of the city. Then the gate guard makes him follow that exact road, so the boy gratefully bows, then darts forward. The main character strides through Flizia's bustling streets, eyes sweeping across every corner as he studies the crowds, like the whole city is packed and breathing right in his face. Tatsuya takes one look around and realizes the humans here are totally different. Bigger bodies, eyes set a little lower than his, and even the kids tower over him, larger in every way. He spots the sign, and it hits him. This whole room houses a store, and because he's got special skills, he can understand every word they say and read every language floating around here. He doesn't spot a single elf-looking soul, so he assumes high elves are basically extinct. Then he panics, thinking this city might trash them or pretend they never exist, so he decides he can't let anyone see he's an elf. At last, the hero spots a massive guild building looming ahead, grins in shock, and blurts out, wide-eyed and amazed, that this is the Adventurers Guild. The main character steps into the Adventure Guild, swallows hard, and blurts out that he needs to register. Then he spots two signs bolted to a stand, each plastered with ads. One points to reception, the other to registration. Tatsuya ends up in the bustling registration hall where new adventurers are getting signed in, packed wall to wall with people, and right away he spots three girls beaming behind the reception desk. The first girl tells the client, "It's done. Now you've got a list of monsters to wipe out." The second adds, "Those plants only grow in the fields by the west gate." And the third just smiles like she knows exactly what happens next. The main character creeps up to the reception desk, stalling with every step, then mutters like he's terrified to speak, right as the third girl spots him and snaps her head toward his direction. She grins sweetly and flushes, asking what happened to him and whether he's lost. And she's so adorable that Tatsuya feels like she's glowing, like light is pouring into the entire room. He's stunned by her beauty, throws both hands up over his head like he's trying to shield himself from her sweetness, and in his head he's already calling her an angel, while she has no idea why he's reacting like that. She just keeps smiling warmly and closes her eyes. Tatsuya hammers the rule into his own mind. No distractions, then, cheeks warming, he leans on the registration desk and declares that he came here to register as an adventurer, making the girl gasp in shock. The guild worker freezes, stunned and speechless. Then she clears her throat, shakes off the shock, and steels herself to finally speak to the kid. She looks totally confused, but keeps smiling, then says this is the reception desk, and she couldn't believe a kid this cute would come here to look for work. The girl catches her mistake and asks his name. She can't help but think she's really pretty, and a warm blush creeps over her as the thoughts hit. Then she introduces himself as Tetsuya, flashing a sweet smile like he owns the moment. She grins and introduces herself as Lin Bell, the guild administrator, then takes the documents and says, "Nice to meet you," and he fires the same warm reply back. Watching all this, he reminds himself his one job is to get along with her. The girl slides a piece of paper onto the table in front of him, one she grabbed earlier, and tells him to fill out the application form, and the boy looks her in the eye, genuinely thanking her. Lin grips the form in his hands, says they should start registering, then grabs a scrap of paper, only to freeze in surprise when she blurts out whether he can actually store things like that. Tatsuya lights up and says, "Yeah, sure, I'm just not sure how to use it yet," then asks if storing stuff is some kind of special skill. She grins and tells him it's incredibly rare because it can hold a ton of things. Lin Bell snaps his card shut and admits bitterly that because he's got this skill, his magic level will be lower than everyone else. Then the girl tells him not to spiral, and the boy stands there completely stunned. For now, he keeps his magical powers locked up in his head. No confessions, no hints to anyone, so he stays tight-lipped and quietly goes along with her, saying nothing out loud. The girl hands him a card and tells him, "This is your personal guild card." Then Lin Bell spells it out. Guild ranks swing from F all the way up to S, and if he wants to be a real seeker, he's got to hit C first. The main character tells her he truly gets it, sincerely thanks her, then asks if he can start his work now, and Lin Bell smiles, saying she'd even been thinking about sending him out to wipe out the goblins. She thinks this request happens all the time, so he can just chill and not rush to work, but she's stuck on what to do, so she turns to the main character and asks what he thinks, and the boy nods along, then tells her, "Give me that request." Lin beams and tells him it's great, then throws her best wishes his way, urging him to remember that goblins make their home at the North Gate. Suddenly, the girl thrusts her hand toward him and hooks out her tiny pinky, and the main character just can't figure out what she's asking for. Lin snaps at him to stay sharp. There are wolves out there, and worse monsters too. So she orders him not to hang around and to come back fast, and she demands a promise. She stared at her own hand and suddenly got it, like the truth hit her all at once. Then he went wide-eyed, cheeks burning, and erupted, blurting it out loud in total embarrassment. He even wiggles his little finger at her, staring like it's a clue. And Tatsuya copies the move, trembling hers in the air and sealing a promise, while the main character is left totally baffled, because the moment he touches her fingers for the first time, his brain just goes blank. After a while, the main character slips out of the giant city and ends up in the western fields where goblins lurk. Even now, the boy keeps staring at his little finger, still glowing red and still smiling like the girl's touch lit something bright inside him. He can't stop thinking about his new friend, Lin Bell, she grins, and tells him that once he has this skill, his magic level will be weaker than everyone else. And now he's wondering, did she really say that back then? Turns out, he won't ever grow into a true warrior. He'll only manage 2 skills, one for storing items and one for whipping up all kinds of seasonings. He trudges down the path, lost in a million thoughts about who he really is, and then assumes he must be a cook with insane storage skills because when sadness hits, he spits out a sarcastic, "That's great," like he can't think of anything else to say. Tatsuya drags his fingers across his chin, mulls it over, and realizes that this skill isn't exactly a place to show off. Then, out of nowhere, he hears a weird extra sound. Right beside him, near those sprawled bushes, two little goblins clutch clubs. Tatsuya clocks them instantly, and the monsters snap their angry eyes on him. Two monsters sprint straight at him, clubs raised to smash his skull, and he freezes for a split second, then snaps into action. While he dodges and fights back, he steels himself and thinks, "My skills are limited, but I can still become an adventurer." Tatsuya locks in with pure determination, thrusts his right hand forward, dashes to strike two goblins, and yells about soy sauce magic as a sizzling stream of soy sauce blasts at them. Then he grins, thinking he'll master this skill and wipe out everyone. The monsters howl in shock as the main character blasts them with a stream of soy sauce, and the goblins flinch, clamping their hands over themselves without dropping their clubs, yet they can't stop it because the sauce slithers straight into their mouths. The monsters start sobbing and trying to spit it out. Tootsie, it won't come out. So they keep attacking foes that are already gone, swallowed by the rolling flow of soy sauce. The main character can't stop thinking about how he totally crashed his own life by wiping out a wave of soy sauce on. Now Tatsuya has to fire an arrow made from soy sauce, so he launches his move, pinching his left middle and index fingers together, then swinging them with his right hand to smack a goblin and blast him backward. After a while, Tatsuya exhales in a weird little huff, stares at the system window, and there it is. The storage space packed with 10 goblins in the main character's inventory, and the window shrinks right down. He thrusts his right hand forward, triggers his storage skill, and one of the goblins erupts into a white flying sphere wrapped in a glowing white ring, and Tatsuya is thrilled because he managed to wipe out all 10 goblins. Dusk is creeping in. He glances up at the sky, sees the sun already sinking, and knows he has to race back to the guild. No matter what, he'd sworn to Lynbell he'd be back before sunset. So the blush creeping over his face as he stares at his little finger hits hard, remembering that vow with her, and then, boom, he spots something nearby and snaps his eyes wide in shock. Tatsuya shoots his mouth open, and, pure reflex snapping into place, he drops into a squat just in time, dodging the wolf's leap meant to slam into him. The main character skids across the ground, bracing himself with his hand so he won't eat dirt, and then Tatsuya's eyes go wide with horror, because it's a wolf. The thing drops to all 4 paws in one smooth landing, and both of them lock stares, pure hostility in every breath. He thrusts his hand forward, ready to strike, and flicks out an arrow made of soy sauce, but it misses the mark, and the wolf jukes out of the way by springing up, escaping his line of attack. The monster gapes at the soy sauce like it's pure magic, then swings its mouth open in shock, while Tatsuya, still stuck with his hand from the attack, crumples inward because the wolf actually dodged it. Panic hits him as he realizes he's seconds from attacking, and the main character snaps his left index and middle fingers together, grips them with his right hand, and charges forward to splash him with soy sauce. The boy trembles, then lunges midair at the wolf, flying in for a shot with a soy sauce arrow, trying to cripple it, and this time his arrow strikes dead on target. Tatsuya's jaw drops. His attack hit way harder than he expected. Then he watches his enemy's lifeless body tumble to the ground, and he can't even process what just happened. Tatsuya's eyes go wide when he realizes he can crank his power higher. Then he's stunned by how that's even possible, so he shrugs it off as a fluke, staring hard at his right hand like it just betrayed him. Suddenly, a system window pops up right in front of Tatsuya. He jolts awake, stares in disbelief at what he's seeing, then whips his attention to it with wide-eyed shock as new messages start rolling in. He notices the level shot up and fresh seasonings have been unearthed. His seasoning cooking skill jumps from level 1 to level 2, and now he's unlocked pastry seasonings level 2, crafting things like chocolate and eggs. And yeah, that's seriously weird. Tatsuya smiles because he remembers that chocolate can go into seasonings, so he thinks this skill is a winner, especially since something tasty just landed in his arsenal, too. He doesn't waste a second. He grunts, snaps back to what matters, and remembers he has to archive the wolf. Then he thrusts his right hand forward, and instead of the fallen enemy's body, a white sphere pops into existence and floats just above the ground. With that done, he stuffs the wolf into storage. Tatsuya jerks his head up and points out that the sun already dropped below the horizon, lights almost gone. Then panic hits as he blurts that he has to rush to the guild because he promised Lin Bell he'd be there before sunset. After a bit, the main character finally reaches the Adventure Guild, and there's a furious Lin Bell waiting, chewing him out for showing up late. Tatsuya shoots her an apology, admitting he completely lost track of the time. Then he thrusts his hands out in a peace offering and turns bright red. In his head, he's realizing she leaned in way too close, and he's honestly convinced he's about to lose his mind. She's still furious, her voice cutting as she warns him that it's dangerous to head back alone in this kind of darkness. Then she tells him to make sure he returns before sunset next time. Linnea leans in close and shoves the question at him, demanding, "Do you agree?" Tatsuya freezes, then answers yes, then immediately blushing, he realizes just how close she is and how stunning she looks, and he feels like he's about to die from pure happiness. The girls behind the counter stay frozen in silence, staring at everything in disbelief. Lin asks, "So you really fought a lot of goblins?" And he snaps back, "Way too many." Lin presses, "Is that true?" And then she throws down the message. Monsters have to be wiped out right away. Lin Bell snatches his hand and yanks him forward, and the main character freezes, stunned, blurting out in awe even before he fully gets what she's trying to do. The girl tells him softly that she hopes he's not rushing, then pulls him forward with a quick little step until he realizes she's holding his hand, and a huge blush explodes across his face. He's stunned, but he still drops into step behind the girl, too scared to argue, and he can't stop thinking he finally found the kind of jackpot the world only gives once. Linbu drags him to the Adventurers Guild's backyard, packed with people, then barrels straight toward one specific man. She refuses to let go of the still bewildered protagonist's hand, then blurts out, "Vulga!" at a man like it's an alarm, and he shoots around in shock, dropping whatever he was doing to look at her. The man shoots her a stunned look as she comes right up to him. Then he reaches in to fix her headdress with his right hand and demands, "What happened?" Lin Bell clasps her hands like she's begging and shuts her eyes, whispering that she's brought someone to him. Volga boasts that Belle herself walked up to him, so there's no way he can turn her down. Then he gets asked who this kid really is, and the guy assumes Tatsuya is just another adventurer, but the main character names himself anyway, Tatsuya. Lin Bell lets out a quiet breath of relief. The man slides his right hand off his headdress, declares, "I'm Volga," and grins, then adds that he's the one who's in charge of the monsters here. Volga snaps in frustration when the main character shows up empty-handed, assuming he hasn't hunted at all. Then Tatsuya blurts out, "Hold on, give me 1 minute," and instantly remembers his prey. After a short while, he drags out the dead bodies, hauls them onto the table, and shows them to his new friends, telling them those are all he's got. Volga and Lin stare in shock, then look at the defeated corpses and realize they're way more stunned than they expected. The man bursts out that he finally realizes he can stash items, and he can't believe a wolf is even here. Then Volga snaps into action, studies the boy's prey up close, and spots the liquid on the bodies. He leans in and asks the boy what stinky liquid this is, the one that leaves every monster drenched, and Tatsuya answers, half guessing, half curious, that he just decided to mess around and test it a little. He mulls it over in his head. Yeah, he has to scrub off the soy sauce before he brings the goblins he just killed into his house. Then it hits him he forgot, and he snaps at himself, calling his own brain a fool. Volga snaps that they've got to be scrubbed clean with water. Then he crouches, grabs a watering can from the bottom shelf of the table, where the monsters the boy defeated are laid out. The man slams the magic stone, and suddenly the watering can erupts with fresh water. No water inside, no explanation, while the main character stares at the roaring stream, completely stunned. Tatsuya can't believe it. Magic stones are so powerful they actually conjure water, and this world is unreal. He stares in awe as Volga grabs one of the wolves by the tail and drags it through the water to wash the bodies. Once he's done hacking apart the monsters the boy brought down, the man finishes off the job and says he gathers stones and fur already ready to go, even though he hasn't tied them up into sellable bags nearby. Tatsuya fires a question. After he pulls the stones out, what does he do with the monsters? He jabs a finger at the sealed bags nearby and assumes they're meat. Volga claims he tosses the carcasses because they're no longer useful to them, while the boy just stares, totally confused, then nods like, I get it. Lin Bell beams as she thanks the man for clearing away the stones and showing the newcomer the ropes, and Volga sweetly tells her to reach out to him again. Then the girl, still grinning, practically pushes the main character to head back to the guild building with her. After a little while, Lin Bell and Tatsuya stroll back together, fingers locked as they hold hands. When he finally gets back late, he can't stop replaying this. Lin Bell is furious, and deep down he still refuses to believe she's actually worried about him. A grin spreads across his face as he realizes she's been thinking about him, and the moment those thoughts hit, heat floods his cheeks. Then, out of nowhere, she snaps his name like it's serious business. The girl blurts it out without even looking back. She wants to ask him something, and the moment her voice shifts, the main character is hit with pure dread, bracing for sharp changes that can only spell trouble. Lin Bell grins, but her aura screams fury. She snaps that she already warned him it was dangerous, and yet he still wiped out 2 wolves. Then she hits him with a full-on threat as he just sits there stunned that she's truly lost control. The main character stands by the registration desk, and there sits Lin Bell behind it. This is his very first award for all the work he's done, and pure joy lights up his face. She places a money bag right in front of him, tells him it's packed with 8 silver coins, and declares that it's his reward for the job he just did. She's glowing with pure joy, smiling so wide, she can't help but thank him from the bottom of her heart. Then the girl just shrugs it off, calm as ever, and says, "Don't thank me." The second her tone flips, she leans in and snaps at him not to get too cocky. Then she clicks her brushes into a tight bundle, plants them in front of her, and fires off a terrifying grin, asking, straight to the point, if he got it. He panics, then quickly nods along and agrees, because he knows he messed up. After that, Lin Bell tears into him for another 30 minutes, lays out the rules plain as day, and makes it clear there's no coming back once you're late. Then she warns him not to upset the girl again, and he promises to do everything he can to make sure it never happens twice. Once Lin finally settles down, the main character snaps his head toward the girl with pure fear blazing in his eyes, remembering something in the worst way, and blurts that he wanted to ask her something, leaving her staring back in shock. Tatsuya's cheeks flare as he timidly hooks his index fingers together, but then he admits he has nowhere to sleep tonight. So he blurts out, "Can I crash at your place tonight? I've got nowhere else to go." And the girl snaps back, glaring at him with pure irritation and anger. Right out of nowhere, Lin Bell rockets out of his chair, yells that he doesn't even know what time it is, and the boy panics so hard he can't help but shut up, while the girl, fired up in the same breathy rush, snaps at him why he's being so irresponsible. Right then, a third person snaps in, "What's going on here?" Lin Bell and Tatsuya whip around to the voice that interrupted them, and they finally lock eyes on her. Right in front of them stands a stunning adult woman, Lin Bell, who practically blurts out that the girl should be called Kana, then looks at her like, "You can't leave this kid out tonight," and starts figuring out where to put him so he can finally rest. The main character's cheeks flare up when he spots a beautiful girl, and Akane jolts in surprise. This is really bad, then tells Lin Bell to ask Grimace if he can rent a room for the night. The girl darts off at once, says she'll ask him right now, and begs him to hold on for a second. Meanwhile, Akimi flashes a sweet, sly smile and slips after her as she exits. Suddenly, the girl shoots the boy a question. "Are you Tatsuya?" and he blurts out a shaky yes, stumbling over the words like he's not fully sure. She leans in toward him, smiling sweetly, and keeps the folders stuffed with documents clutched in her hands. Akane tells him, "Don't freak out. If Belle's mad, it's only because she's scared to death for you." The girl grins and tells him to ask anything. She'll gladly help. Then the main character's cheeks explode in a blush because he can't focus on her words. His eyes keep drifting straight to her chest. Lin Bell finally makes it, leans into Akane and says, "Gleema agreed," then spots a girl and a ridiculously red boy spinning around, staring at them like, "Wait, who are you?" She bolted right up to them, throwing her body between her friend and Tatsuya's humiliation, and red-hot embarrassment flooded her face as she told Akane, "Don't you corrupt him. He's still just a child." And Akane immediately demanded, "Is that really true?" Soon enough, they're already crammed into the room for the night. Lin Bell tells him he can stay here for today. In the corners, it's just one bed, one chair, and one plain mirror hanging on the wall. And then the girl finally starts to make her move, leaving the main character totally baffled as he watches her every action, clueless about what she's trying to give him. She slips the bread into his hands, pinching it by the napkin so her dirty fingers won't smear it, and he's totally stunned by how sweet and considerate she is. Lin Bell blurts that he still hasn't eaten dinner, and Tatsuya's cheeks burn as he hesitates, then earnestly thanks her, carefully taking the bread right out of her friend's hands. The girl beams and tells him it's late, so he better get some rest. Lin Bell turns away, and a shy blush creeps across her face as she tells him goodnight with real sincerity. Left alone in that empty room, he can't help but blush, and then his thoughts spiral. The way she fed him bread feels like proof, and he finally swears Lin Bell must be an angel walking on earth. Right up until he whips his head around and spots a mirror. He's still clutching the bread in his hands when he steps up to him. Then, stunned, he snaps his hand to his own face, trying to feel and confirm this look is really happening, because the main character can't remember what he looked like as an adult anymore. He glares at the bed tucked in the corner by the window, then collapses onto it like he's finally home, bread and a napkin landing in his lap as relief hits. He snatches the loaf up, takes one bite, and the guy keeps chewing the bread in his hands, thinking, "Sure, I'm starving, but with this childish body, a few bites are all I need." The main character folds both hands in a grateful gesture, blushes, and thanks Lin Bell for her dinner, right down to the bread. He flopped onto the bed and let out a breath like all the stress finally vanished. Tatsuya never expected these words, but now he's genuinely over the moon, because he has a job, and he's even met the cutest little angel. He shuts his eyes, and just thinking about Lin Bell makes a shy blush creep across his face. Next morning, bright golden sunlight blasts through the window and lands on Tatsuya's face, while he keeps snoring, totally carelessly. He rubs his sleepy eyes with his left hand, leans on his right, pushes himself up, and freezes, because somehow it's already morning. Then strange noises crash in, and he realizes someone's shouting. He stares out the giant window as sunlight pours in, convinced it's the world outside shouting at him. Then the boy cracks his door open and steps out, slow and deliberate, like he's about to face something real. The main character lands in the corridor and rushes down a huge wooden staircase into a room where new adventurers sign up, and orders get passed back and forth. Tatsuya spots a huge door dead ahead, and even without knowing what's on the other side, he can feel something big is happening behind it. So he swings it open, then stares in disbelief at what's inside. The main character peers through the crack in the door and spots a man right ahead, half naked and working his body hard, swinging a huge axe left and right like he's in a fight. Tatsuya clocks him staring, and the man flashes this wild, smug pleasure, then bam, he vanishes out of nowhere. The boy misses it completely and scrambles, wondering where he even went. Suddenly the boy spots a man looming right in front of him and snaps his eyes up, only to realize it's the same guy who was just looking down from above, and he demands why the main character opened the door, leaving the boy stunned. A little while later, a man and a boy end up in the backyard of the guild building for adventurers, axe slung over his shoulder, and the man just stares at Tatsuya. He grins and admits, "Wait, I'm Tatsuya," his voice shaky with disbelief. Then the other guy nods with a stutter and blurts out, "Thanks for the restroom." The man keeps grinning at the main character like a spotlight, locks eyes with him, and proudly introduces himself as Guildmaster Gerald. Then he flashes, "I'm really happy to meet you, kid." Tatsuya's eyes widen. "Wait, this is the Guildmaster?" And he blurts out, "Sure, he's amazing." While Gerald mentions Tatsuya has a box for goods, and the kid nods in stunned agreement, staring right at him. With a grim face, the man tells him he's the only one in town with this skill, and then leans in, asking if he needs to say anything right now. The main character runs Gerald's words through his mind again, claiming he's the only one with that rare skill, and the boy nods along, refusing to challenge him. Gerald's voice trembles as he asks, "Why can't you sleep this early?" And the boy blurts out that he just heard a voice. The man admits he came here because he's itching to learn from the training, then offers to have the boy join, only for the boy to politely wave him off and insist he's totally fine. Right then, someone yells for Tatsuya, and the voice sounds relieved that he's finally here. Meanwhile, right behind him, Gerald's shoulders sag as the boy shuts him down and refuses to train together. Turns out she's his brand new girlfriend. She smiles and strides right up to them, and Tatsuya grins as he wishes Rockbell a good morning, joy lighting up his face. Then the girl answers right back with the same warm energy. She shoots the Guildmaster a bright good morning, and he smiles back and greets her too. Then our main character can't help but think it. Rockbell looks like pure beauty in the morning. Gerald whips around to Belle, grinning, and says, "You're early today," then offers to team up for a joint morning workout. And Belle just shrugs. "I'm fine." Rockbell and Tetsuya turn away from that wilted man who just couldn't take a simple refusal to train. Then they slip back into holding hands, and Rockbell asks if he slept well. Tetsuya grins and says, "Yeah, straight up, it's all because of her." They're pacing down a corridor lit by a window when, out of nowhere, someone clocks both of them, greets them with a bright "good morning," then blurts out in shock. A boy and a girl stare ahead and spot a girl right in front of them, shocked because when she sees them strolling hand in hand, she gasps that he's holding hands with Belle. She snaps, realizing the main character is that kid from yesterday. Then Rockbell smiles and tells a strange girl good morning, calling her Mel. And the girl says the boy stayed with him yesterday instead of checking into a hotel. The girl realizes she's early too, and Rockbell steals a glance at the main character, cheeks warming as she admits she was only curious, while Tatsuya's own face tinges with a blush the moment he catches the girl staring. Mel's eyes gleam like everything finally makes sense, and with pure curiosity in her voice, she fires a question. "So, did you register yesterday as an adventurer?" He grins and answers, "Yeah, I did," then tells her, "My name is Tatsuya." With a sweet smile, she balances on one leg, one hand tucked to her side, and the other clutching her books. Then a blush spreads across her cheeks as she introduces herself as Mel and says she's genuinely thrilled to meet you. Tatsuya can't stop mulling over his new crew. Akane is drop-dead gorgeous, Rockbell's got that big sister fire, and Mel's an adorable, wildly active 1-year-old, and he blurts out, "Did we just stack the guild with way too many beauties?" The main character whips around to Mel and blurts out, "So, are you younger than Belle?" And Mel freezes, stunned, before her face lights up as she shoots back, "Yes, you're right. She was my mentor." Mel starts gushing about her friend, like praising her as both a mentor and a genuinely amazing person, saying she's sweet, kind, and downright charming, and the girl can't handle it. She stammers, blushes hard, and gets all embarrassed. Rockbell admits, a little embarrassed, that she praises Sienna too much, and the girl's face flushes even hotter as she blurts out an apology, while the boy can't help but stare like, "That's a weird way to react." The girl whips around and asks the main character if he's ready to take on the goblins again today. Then he answers with a confident yes. Roku Bell insists he never forgets that day, then reaches for something, and Tatsuya's jaw drops at what she pulls out. A guild worker thrusts a tiny map into his hands, pinning a building on it, and tells him it's cheap housing with breakfast and dinner. Then her voice drops, urging him to sprint home. ASAP. After a while, he strides down the city street and spots the building his new girlfriend kept teasing him about. His eyes widen and he mutters like, "Could this be the place?" Straight ahead, a massive building towers over him, plastered with animal paw logos. He pushes the creaky wooden door open and steps in, slow, like he's soaking in every detail. He turns the corner and stares ahead at this huge room packed with people. It looks exactly like a dining hall, then spots a long corner table running through it with visitors seated on one side while the staff stands ready on the other. Everyone dives into the food while the workers pass it out, and the boys spot someone begging for their water. One boy thanks them for the meal, and the other jumps in, nodding back with a big thanks of his own. Right there, the main character stares in, and Tatsuya's mind races. This is non-stop, a real busy season. Then, out of nowhere, the person beside him snaps, "Hey, what's wrong?" A woman blocks the main character's path, dressed like an employee of this very institution he's about to call home. She wipes her hands on an apron stamped with the building's logo and beams at the boy with a warm, gentle smile. Tatsuya answers the question from before with a bright yes and asks if he can rent a room today. Then the woman snaps her hand over her mouth, stunned, wondering if he's really an adventurer. He shoots back with a confident yes, and the woman smiles, saying everything's set, just 4 silver coins up front. She extends her hand with the money resting in it, then asks the woman if she's on board, and the woman grins, saying, "It's perfect." Tatsuya's cheeks go red with shyness as he clasps his hands and vows he'll cover the lodging starting tomorrow, and the woman nods and makes concessions, agreeing that this works just fine too. With a grin lighting up his face, the main character walks out of the place Lin Bell pointed him to, and the woman follows right behind, smiling back as if it all feels perfectly easy. The boy strides down North Market Street in a stunning city, then slows as he gapes at the food stalls spilling over with every delicious thing imaginable. Tatsuya is a little stunned. Only one market here? But then he realizes this is where you really size up prices and see how currency value plays out. And just as he's looking, the guy spots something on the right and points out that they're selling bread behind the baking counter. Just as he's locked onto the bakery shelves, a booming shout snaps him out of it from behind. Someone groans in defeat and yells that they need help, and he whips around, eyes wide with shock. He watches the old man crumple to his knees before the guard, filled with resigned defeat. Yeah, everyone's going to see this, and the shock is everywhere, while a man with panic in his voice begs for help because he lost his daughter in the forest. He insists that even though they're Russian, there's no choice. They have to cut through the forest, where he stops a man in armor, gripping a weapon, and tells him to watch out. Wolves roam here, and they're insanely sensitive to scent. The knight in front of him shouts that he's sorry, but the man has to be convinced his daughter is gone. Then the man drops his head and breaks, tears flooding out as grief crushes him. The boy turns away, leaving that brutal, heartbreaking sight behind. He makes a beeline for the city's main exit, then quietly bows to the old man and apologizes because he just didn't have the strength to do it before. And deep down, the main character can't stop thinking how badly he feels for him. He dashes out through the city gate, where guards and armor are back on duty, and heads straight for the hunting field where goblins usually get wiped out. After a moment, he lunges and smashes the goblin with a wild soy sauce attack, then roars at him to take it. Only he's totally defenseless, gets crushed by the main character, and drops out of the fight. He thrusts his right hand out and bam! An icy white sphere plus a glowing ring pop into existence before vanishing again. Then he hauls the goblin's body off to storage, and the main character mutters that this is the 10th goblin he's killed. He suddenly whips around, then I spot something right behind me. Then, boom, another goblin steps in. The boy snaps his right hand with 2 folded fingers, props it up with his left, and fires a blistering soy sauce blast ahead of everyone's expectations. But the boy slams him back with an attack and ends the goblin for good. Tatsuya thrusts his right hand forward, and once again, right where the goblin's body should be, there's a blinding white sphere. He drags the enemy into his storage and murmurs that maybe a dab of soy sauce can work sometimes, but for him, butter is the real convenience. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, the main character catches talk about a fireball and snaps his attention toward it. TPM finds another adventurer at his side, and together they lunge in. One goblin blasts him with fire, and he's instantly engulfed. The other guy just stares as the goblin shrieks and burns in flames, saying nothing. Meanwhile, the main character feels crushed, clueless, and thinks, he even looks like an adventurer. He stares him down and spots it instantly. The flame's magic shines strong, gorgeous, and downright cool. Then he watches the guy grin with pure rage, and in his left hand whip up another fireball, tiny but already blazing. Tatsuya stares at his hand as soy sauce drips out in little portions, sadness hitting him hard. Then he clamps down on those thoughts and tells himself, no more, because all he's got to do now is earn money. After a while, Tatsuya strides across a gorgeous field and stares at the system window that pops up right in front of him. Then he checks his inventory and finds 20 goblins, grins, and decides he's wiped out enough and it's time to head back. Suddenly, he spots something weird on his left and whips his head around, totally thrown off. Then he stares at the massive, pitch-black trees ahead and realizes, with a chill, he's staring into a creepy forest. He snaps his mouth open in shock, then freezes. This creepy forest feels way too wrong, and suddenly memories slam into him. A girl vanished here this morning. The main character spins around, ready to bolt from this awful place, and blurts a breathless thank you to himself, because he's got an appointment with Belle. So it's time to head back. Suddenly, he whips around to see what's creeping behind him, and he faces the same creepy forest that scared him before. Only now a dark silhouette stares back, and he can't stop asking what in the world it is. Right as the main character thought he was safe, a tiny, terrified girl burst out of the forest in a short, cute dress, gasping for air, crying like her heart was breaking, and trying to run through the pain. A terrified little girl lunges toward him, blaring for help, and Tatsuya freezes, because what he just discovered hits him like a shock. She rushes up, spills the details fast. Wolves are nearby, and with eyes wide in amazement, Tatsuya asks her again, straight out, what's going on with those wolves? She snaps around, horror frozen on her face as a noise blasts from behind, and the main character whips his head the same way, toward the direction she bolted from earlier, stunned. A bunch of wolves come tearing at them with vicious intent, and the main character finally clocks it. He's trapped inside a truly evil pack, and the sheer reality of it hits him hard. A girl fighting back tears hides behind Tatsuya, despair burning in her eyes, while he's torn up with fear and confusion, because he remembers the promise he made to Belle, and now it looks like he might not be able to keep it. A pack of wolves closes in from every side, trapping the boy and the girl in their circle. She's trembling, tears streaming, hiding behind him as fear screams in her eyes, and she clutches her chest with both hands. Tatsuya instantly senses they're getting boxed in, and his mind races. What do they do to break out and win? The wolves snarl, flash wicked grins, and stare them down with pure rage. They hear it coming, something they'll have to fight, and it's going to be brutal, because he can't aim the oil beam at all 5 enemies at once. He's already mapping the battle in his head as they close in from every side, and if he uses both hands, the other wolves will rush in and tear them apart. The girl peeks out from behind Tatsuya, terrified, and the main character steels himself, staring straight at the wolves like, we're getting out of this, somehow. He's convinced his skills can turn him into a weapon against the enemy, so he scrambles to recall every move he can use right now, and boom, memories slam into my head, flashing like screenshots of what system he's on, which windows, and the exact details he needs. The boy panics because he knows this has to be the one thing he hasn't tried yet, stares at his left hand with shaking doubt, and races through his next move, because it might be his only shot. With sheer focus burning on his face, the main character swears he can make products using spices, so he shoots his right hand forward, and with a heavy burst of concentration, an egg snaps into his palm. Then a second one follows right after. Tatsuya locks eyes with the girl, startled that she remembers, and asks why he's even doing this for a prize. So she tilts her head, presses both hands to her chest, and stares at him, hopeful and completely confused. He snaps 2 fingers to his nose, urges her to keep it sealed tight, and with his words and actions, new acquaintance feels instantly put off. She can't figure out what he's after or what he's about to do next. The hero rockets the eggs ahead, and they smash open, shells shattering on impact. Behind him, the girl stares in shock, while in front of the boy, a rotten yolk of white creeps out, spreading across the ground inch by inch. She doesn't even manage to close her nose before she can figure out why he told her to hold it. The rotten egg smell hits, and she throws both hands over her nose as tears flood her eyes from the brutal stench. 2 smashed eggs stink up the whole place, brutally strong, and the boy keeps his nose shut tight, pinching it with 2 fingers, gasping that it's way more stressful than he ever imagined. He stared at the shattered food on the ground and secretly grinned, because he finally crafted the egg exactly how he wanted, and the main character had been planning those rotten eggs from the very start. They stare at the smashed eggs oozing that rotten stink, and it hits so hard even Tatsuya nearly collapses with nausea, because he knows those sensitive wolves won't stand a chance after an attack like this. The girl beside me is shaking, sick to her stomach from the awful smell of spoiled eggs. The heroes scan the clearing and spot every last wolf sprawled on the ground, lifeless, unmoving, while their enemies are smashed all across the whole territory, scattered by that brutal, rotten egg attack. Still pinching his nose, Tatsuya secretly lets out a breath of relief. Everything actually worked, and he tells himself it's a good thing it's finally over. All that's left is to grab the rest. Until the moment he sees the girl, and his thoughts get yanked right out of his head. He glances at the girl beside him, shaking with emotions spilling over, and he looks totally confused, while she keeps 2 fingers on her nose and chokes out through tears that she can't do this anymore. Tears spill over her eyes as they slowly shut. Her hand drops from her nose, and she crumples onto the filthy ground, unconscious, while the main character rushes to her side, voice trembling with worry, asking if she's okay. He's stunned by her fall, but he figures she's just passed out. Tatsuya stares at the girl sprawled on the ground with her mouth hanging open, convinced she only needs a little sleep. Suddenly it hits him. Those defeated opponents are sprawled on the ground right beside them, and Tatsuya strides over to one of the wolves. He thrusts his right hand forward, yanking at the wolf's storage, flickering with tiny tremors, trying to shove the wolf's corpse straight into his inventory. Nothing goes right for him. He's still clutching his nose, and the main character blurts out in shock, unable to understand why his ability won't work. He can't figure out why they won't move into the box. The boy steps in even closer, staring hard at one wolf as it sticks out its tongue and gapes its mouth. And then he feels that tiny tremble, realizing the wolf is still alive, so he knows he can't leave them stunned. In this case, the main character turns out 3 more eggs in his right hand, then shoots out his arm with a sick, creepy grin, rotten eggs and all, driving them right toward the wolf's body. Tatsuya shoots his palm up like a command, lifts his hand a touch higher so he can lock eyes on his fresh victim, and snarls that all they need is a small taste of this stink. At last, the wolf finally drops, defeated, and a trail of rotten egg mess coats his face. The hero grins and declares the ending perfect, like the victory was all his. Then he snaps the remains into clean white spheres and stuffs them into a storage spot in his inventory. So he goes in to take down another wolf, then freezes. Does he really think Belle won't snap at him again like last time? Suddenly, her stern glare hits him, her voice calling his name, book clutched in her hands, and those memories come rushing back. The main character scoops the girl up while she's still out cold, swings her onto his back with care, and tells her, it's okay. He can't believe it. He's really about to rescue a girl, with a rotten egg. And all he can think about are those smashed eggs, the yolk and white exploding out, reeking so bad it makes his stomach twist. Tatsuya hauls the girl on his back, and as the realization hits, a shy blush creeps in while he grins. Then the main character laughs and calls it a historic feat, and they stride toward the city across the fields and the path. The little girl riding on the back of the main character finally blinks awake, shaky and unsure, and stares at the boy with heavy, bleary eyes, while Tatsuya grins, relieved she's back, and flashes her a real, warm smile. He tells her they're finally out of the forest and heading back to the city, and she blurts out, shocked, then asks where the wolves that attacked her back then went. Katsuya lowers her gently, then stumbles and scratches her cheek with his fingertip, embarrassed enough to cover her eyes, while the main character flashes a good-natured grin and tells her he wiped them out, eggs and all. The girl snaps her eyes open, blurts out a surprised, shaky question about the eggs. Then, just a moment later, her expression flips completely to the other side. She clings to every moment right before she blacked out. Then fresh tears spill into her eyes. She grimaces, wrinkles in disgust, and clamps both hands over her nose, still reeling from that awful, rotten egg stench. The main character blurts out, panicked, "What's wrong with me?" But the girl squints through her fingers, still clamped over her nose, and snaps, "That smell? It reeks like rot." Tatsuya tells himself she just can't stand eggs, then blurts out, "Are you okay?" with worry in his voice as he stares at her. Then a voice snaps in from the side, and I call out, "Elena!" In the distance, the main character spots a man hauling a cart straight toward them, barreling closer, fast. Then an elderly man in harness-like gear sprints up, calling the girl by name with worry etched across his face, and Tatsuya and Elena instantly go wide-eyed in shock. With tears spilling down her cheeks, the girl whips around and blurts that he's her father, her voice trembling as she stares at the cart speeding closer, praying it's finally her rescue. As soon as that elderly man catches up, tears spill from his eyes. Then he clamps his arms around his daughter and swings her close, looping himself around her neck, murmuring, "Elena," and whispering that he's just relieved she's safe. The girl clutches her father even tighter, then breaks down and cries harder than ever, while Elena, a girl who admits she was terrified, says it stank so badly. Tatsuya watches all this and starts wondering if stinky and scary mean the same thing, because when the girl finally settles down, she jabs a finger at the main character and tells her father it was this man who helped her. Then the man gratefully thanks him. He looks a little embarrassed and blurts out, unsure, that he was just passing by, while he throws his hands up, gesturing to stop him, until the guy tells him to wait a second, saying he has to thank him for something. The boy freezes, fuming to himself, and tells the man to ignore him. Then the next second he yanks something from his cart, asks if he wants fresh eggs, and thrusts a basket of them into his hands. With embarrassment flooding his voice, the young man refuses, insisting he truly doesn't need it, and pleads for forgiveness. The man finally cools off, resigned to the truth. His daughter's savior won't take anything. The girl stares at the eggs with eyes popping wide open, and then tears spill. Her whole body starts to shake as she clamps her nose with 2 fingers and blurts out, "I can't stand it, it's rotten eggs." Elena erupts, screaming she refuses to smell them, while the man just stands there totally baffled, wondering what the heck is wrong with his daughter. He stares at his daughter, stunned, and can't figure out what's happening. Then he insists the eggs are fresh. Right after that, the old man turns back to his daughter, who's still frowning, hands clamped over her nose as she keeps crying. Tatsuya stares at the painting, stunned into silence, and realizes the egg must have been even more brutal than the wolves. He cracks an uneasy smile, gives a small wave like, "Yeah, I'm glad I could help," and then says it's time for him to head back. Just as he whirls around and starts heading toward the city, the man keeps staring. Then the girl suddenly shouts, "Big brother!" Tatsuya freezes, stunned, and whips back around. The girl he saved rushes up to him and clings to the boy with all her strength, then breaks into a shy smile, cheeks blazing, tears shining, as she thanks him from the bottom of her heart. He grins back at her with a warm blush rising across his cheeks. Then the cart rattles off and vanishes toward the far horizon, while she beside him lifts a hand and waves goodbye, and he answers right back, waving kindly with his left hand. When the sky finally turns pitch black, the main character strides into the guild, and inside, Tatsuya is stunned to spot a familiar face, his eyes locking on his girlfriend. Lin Bell meets him at the door, glaring like she owns the night, then flips into a wicked grin, arms crossed tight, while he freezes in fear at the girl waiting for him on the stairs. Panic crashes over him as he clocks it. Bell's already in that dangerous, foul mood. Tatsuya blurts that he came back a bit later than the date on the schedule. Lin Bell snaps with hands on her hips. "So you call that an excuse?" And the main character squirms out a shy, sheepish apology. The girl looms up and barks that he has to follow, and he doesn't dare argue, so he nods and agrees. The two of them stroll down the corridor, clinging to each other like the guild building is calling them back, until they finally step into the backyard of the Adventurers Guild. From far off, Fulgen spots them and snaps his eyes toward their direction. With that bright smile still on his face, the man is stunned that Tatsuya showed up so late, and the boy nods along, then begs to be allowed to open his inventory. He thrusts his right hand forward and lets the world see what's inside his vault. On the table, the lifeless bodies of several defeated wolves stare back. Lin Bell's fury spikes, and she's shocked the main character brought a whopping 5 wolves this time, while the boy blurts anxiously to himself, eyes locked on the girl's every reaction. Lin Bell freezes, stunned by what's happening, and she can't accept it's real, because yesterday those wolves left her furious. Now rage still simmers inside her as she glares at the boy, snaps on a fake smile, and turns to Tatsuya, calling him by name. She corners him with a threat in her voice, and the main character panics, hands up in front of him, shaking with fear, trying to de-escalate her before things explode. Volga, right there behind them, suddenly cuts into their talk, whips around to the guy and flat out tells him, "You're getting an E rating." The boy and girl spin around in shock, staring at him like they can't believe what they just heard. Lin Bell blurts out in shock, staring at the man and demanding again if Tatsuya really is getting an E rank. And the main character can't believe what he's hearing either. She pleads with him, reminding him he only became an adventurer yesterday, and the hero is totally baffled. Borges glares down the stairs, staring hard at the bodies ahead, and demands she look closely at the fallen enemies. He spots multiple bite marks on them, yet not a single scratch. Then he stares at the dead wolves and mutters that if there were 5 more, they'd have swarmed together as a full herd. The man whips around to the girl and claims he can wipe them out all by himself. Then Borga stares at Lin Bell and declares she absolutely hits every requirement to earn a promotion to the E rank. Lin Bell can't believe what she's hearing, shocked to the bone. In his head, the main character worships Mr. Borg and swears it's all his doing. Then he clasps his hands in a desperate, pleading pose, staring at him with pure admiration. Right beside Lin Bell, she grunts in annoyed disgust. She lets out a shaky sigh, turns her tired eyes to the man beside her, and reluctantly nods when Mr. Borga pushes, because if he says it's true, she can trust his word. Then the man snaps a hand onto the boy's shoulder, ready to say even more, yet Tatsuya's caught off guard, stunned and completely clueless about what Borgo's really after. A smiling man slaps the boy on the shoulder and warns him, "Don't let Bella get mad at you for being late again today." Then he leans in close and orders him to keep it down, not so loud. Bella, standing right there, frowns at them. A few heartbeats later, the main character and Lin Bell are right inside the registration room. She's behind the desk, and he's planted in front of her, waiting for her to move. Lin shoves the reward money and the ransom money into his hands cold as ice, while a downright evil aura crawls off her, telling Tatsuya that even though she's accepted Porga's call, she's still furious he's late. With a shaky breath, the guy grips the cash in his hands and realizes she's still fuming at him. But this time, he swears he has a real reason for saving the girl. He swore that if he'd told her, she'd have cradled him in her lap, soothed him with gentle strokes, and whispered that she wasn't mad because he'd done everything he could. He blushes hard, stares it down like it's trouble, and clenches his fist as he weighs his next move. Then he whips around to Belle. She stares at him, stunned. Then the boy blurts out that he planned to keep his promise and come home early today. Tatsuya pressed a hand to his chest, swore with a fierce, determined look that he meant to deal with only goblins. And then, just as they set out, wolves came charging after the girl, and she begged him for help. He blurts out that he couldn't just walk away, then drops to his knees, like, honestly, he feels more dragged into this than anything else. At the reception desk, the girl hears him and freezes, mouth hanging open in straight-up shock. She strides up to him, drops right beside him, and calls him by name. Then it clicks for the main character. This kid isn't just any kid anymore. He's a brave little adventurer. And with that smile already on his face, the scene runs wild in his head as he pictures her spoiling him with all the affection she wants. A girl with a terrifying glare snaps, "Where's the F-rank adventurer who fought 5 wolves and escorted me?" And the guy freezes, shocked and scared by how intense she's being. The girl snaps at him hard, and Tatsuya just sits on her lap in total silence. No praise, only a full-on lecture that starts the moment she opens her mouth. After a while, the main character storms out of the guild building, finally lets out a shaky breath, and stares down at his card like it's the key to everything. So yeah, he got lectured for about an hour, but he didn't mind because Belle was basically at his beck and call. Tatsuya snaps his eyes shut and yells, and man, his legs ache like crazy from sitting on them non-stop. The boy grips an E-rank adventurer's card with both hands and holds it up like a prize, staring at it in pure awe. The map's writing confirms it. Tatsuya is officially an E-rank adventurer now, and he can't help grinning like he just hit a brand new milestone. Soon as he's there, he's already at the hotel. Today's cat's running the lunch menu, vegetable and pea soup with a warm baguette. He stares at the spread in front of him and wishes him a great appetite. He takes one bite and his eyes widen because it's insanely delicious. Tatsuya swears it softly melts into his worn-out body, and he just keeps calling it delicious until the plate is suddenly empty, and he just sits there, staring, thinking about every last taste. The hotel employee tells him his room on the second floor is already waiting, and when he gets inside, he collapses onto the bed, dead tired, stretching out while thinking that the hotel the bell had led him to was exactly the help he needed. Memory stumbled through another brutal day. Then a flash of his past hit him. A brutal pack of wolves, and a card stamped with it all, telling him he'd been bumped up to the rank of E and given a shot at even more rank. Tatsuya can't help but grin. Today, Belle finally snapped at him for the first time, and the memory hits so hard that her face flashes in his mind. His cheeks heat up as he realizes she's always been kind to him, and he has to make sure he repays her someday. A full week has flown by since then. Inside the guild building, the main character greets Mel and Lynn Bell with a bright "good morning" because they're finally coming to meet him. Both girls beam as they walk over, with Belle clutching a pile of books and Mel carrying a box in one hand and a scroll in the other. They shoot him a good morning right back, and a girl grins at him like he's a star, telling him he's the very first one here today. Tatsuya just smiles, thinking he's slowly starting to get used to life in this strange world. Tatsuya bolted to the guild first thing in the morning just to greet Lynn, then asked what needed delivering today. She shook her head and said, "Nothing, because in a child's body, he can't take on most delivery jobs." So yeah, most days he's out there in that clearing, smashing goblins like it's his job, and the main character tells them goodbye with a grin, promising he'll head over to calm the goblins down. Belle smiles right back and warns him to be careful. After a while battling on the same field where he always wipes out goblins, the main character finally unlocks his status. Tatsuya looks back and realizes that since he stepped into this world, his seasoning has shot up, and he's even picked up brand new recipes along the way. Then system windows pop up in front of him, flashing his title to The Sad Magician. The boy mulls it over, then slaps his hand to his mouth like he expected, because miso and cream are brutal to wield in battle, especially when he's been trained to rely on soy sauce, the one he can use without missing a beat. He stares into his little box, 10 pieces of bread and 6 goblins, and keeps stacking his savings until he's sitting on 8 gold coins. And if he remembers right, that's around 80,000 yen. Right then, the main character realizes his stomach's screaming for food. So he declares he has to cook dinner, drops onto one of the stones, and with his right hand he whips up chocolate using his skill. After a moment, Tatsuya locks onto his plate with full hunger and dives in like it's going to disappear. He slathers the chocolate he made onto the bread he bought, and just like that, boom, chocolate bread. In a world where there's not a single tasty pastry to be found, he fires up his talent, crafts a batch himself, and devours it, then chows down even faster because, yeah, it's basically solid sugar, but to him it tastes absolutely incredible. The boy keeps shoveling food down and realizes he has to buy dishes and actually learn how to cook. He devours the last bite of his chocolate sandwich and practically sighs with relief. Finally, he's full. Then he jumps back up and charges off to go back to pacifying those goblins. He spots the ground trembling and instantly thinks, earthquake. Then he shoots his own gas idea down right away. The main character whips around, anxiety spiking, like he just heard footsteps behind him. Tatsuya stared into the distance and realized the sounds weren't random at all. They were footsteps. Then a huge orc stepped in front of him and shock hit him hard. Rage burned across the orc's face, and with a gun resting on his shoulder, he looked ready to strike. The boy stares at the orc, baffled. Didn't everyone just spot them up north? That's why he'd been hunting in the west, and he can't shake the memory of that plaque with the orc's picture crossed out. Tatsuya snaps to it and bolts for the exit right now, sprinting like his life depends on it, while the monster keeps pace, never falling behind. Then the main character snaps to it, realizing he's latched onto him with a death grip, and at this pace he can finally catch up. Tatsuya snaps to a stop, realizing he can't keep running, and his thoughts instantly slam into one word. He's going to have to fight. The orc stops dead in front of him, staring the main character straight in the face. The main character knows one clean blow will knock him out cold, so you better move first and stay one step ahead. He shuts his eyes, summons a swirling sphere of soy sauce between his hands, then fires it like an arrow straight at the enemy. The attack slams into the exact spot it was meant for, but the orc barely budges, totally brushing him off. Panic slams into the main character as he realizes the soy sauce arrow won't fire, so he snaps into action, hurls rotten eggs out of nowhere, and forms them right in his right hand. A vicious whistle cut through the air, and a rotten egg rocketed straight toward the huge orc's head, snatching his attention instantly. He jerked his hand up and smashed it in front of his face, blasting stinking egg all over the place, and the orc exploded with fury. Seconds later, a second stinky egg nailed him in the face, no time to even flinch. A rotten smear crawled across the monster's features as the shell shattered and blasted in every direction. The orc's mouth fell open with surprise and pain from the impact. Then he let out a tired sigh. Rage boiled in his veins at the young man, so the orc dropped into a fighting stance, snarled and screamed, and cracked its mouth even wider, while the stink of a rotten egg sprayed across his body. And somehow the orc looked straight up, entertained. The monster snapped its eyes wide on the young man, rage blazing on its muzzle, and the young man staggered back in pure fright, thinking, "What do I do next?" The guy's hands started trembling like crazy, and Tatsuya instantly knew if he didn't strike right now, that orc would tear him apart. The young man, eyes wide and mouth agape, kept staring at the orc, scrambling to figure out his next move. An orc loomed right in front of him, twice Tatsuya's height, and pure terror froze his legs in place. The monster snarled with wild rage, already geared up to strike the kid who dared to toss eggs at him. Tatsuya couldn't make soy sauce or rotten eggs work at all, and it hit him hard. His old attacks weren't strong enough, and he needed something far more powerful. That's why he cracked open the profile and went hunting for anything that could save him. Right away he spotted what felt like his salvation, because he hadn't used a single thing yet that could actually help. The orchard tore into the world like it had a will of its own, roaring open and unleashing an all-out assault to finally wipe out its enemy. Tatsuya shot his hand up, then dark liquid poured out like a threat, and a voice blasted, urging him to taste it, and even worse, promising he'd be forced to try that blazing hot habanero sauce. The orc had zero clue what just hit him, and before he could even shut his mouth, hot sauce came gushing in. He still couldn't figure out what happened as it poured. After a moment, the orc's scream tore through the air, then fire blasted from his mouth. Tatsuya kept his hand pointed at him and realized the orc was stronger than anyone expected, and he was going to make the monster understand there was more to come. Then Tatsuya completely covered his face with sauce. The monster gaped even wider, blasting fire straight from its mouth, while it screamed and fought to shake off the hot sauce. Then sweat and a nasty mix of fluids poured onto its face, steam rising off its skin. He slammed to his knees with a brutal crash, still clawing at the spicy sauce like it was burning into his skin. The orc ripped his mouth open and flicked out his tongue, but that sudden bite of pain nearly tore him apart, so he clung on with every last ounce of strength. Then he crumpled to the ground, still gripping his axe, while the guy just stared. After that brutal fight, he was wheezing, desperately trying to catch his breath. Then Tatsuya finally saw it. His opponent had crumpled to the ground, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The orc lay pinned in place, sweat slicking his face as tears streamed hard across it. And beneath him, a fiery habanero sauce pooled hot on the ground. Tatsuya jammed a stick into the monster's mouth, checked it, and saw it simply wasn't reacting. Everything was under control. Tatsuya slammed his power down and sealed the orc inside his magic box. But suddenly, the young man started shaking again, because the moment he remembered the monster's size, he felt like he'd never be able to handle it. Tatsuya managed a small, quiet, nervous laugh, then dropped to his knees, still trembling. Shattered after that brutal, punishing fight, Tatsu stumbled straight to Lin Bell's guild. The girl sat at the table with an open book in front of her, and her face lit up in pure shock. Tatsuya showed up way earlier than usual. The boy looked utterly shaken, confused, upset, trembling, and staring down with guilt, so badly that Lin Bell couldn't figure out what on earth was crushing her friend's heart. Then, like she just cracked the code, she grabbed his attention and told him to wait. In a cramped room, a young man and Lin Bell sat on the edge of a bed, and Lin Bell couldn't stop vibrating with excitement, convinced something huge was about to happen. But the poor guy kept trembling. He bowed his head and tried to plead his case, while Lin Bell placed her hand on his and soothed him with slow, gentle strokes. Then she wrapped her arms around him like she was his older sister, and the poor guy was completely thrown off. Lin Bell told him to go get some rest, and Tatsuya's cheeks flared at her sweet words. Then he swallowed his embarrassment, thanked Lin Bell for trying to support him, and couldn't help but feel a little warmer inside. They had already ditched the guild building, strolling a tidy path under a cool canopy as the sun stayed blocked overhead. Lin Bell and Tatsuya headed straight for the guy lugging the bags, and then Volga suddenly spotted them and went wide-eyed at their arrival. And once he realized they'd finally come to him, he lit up and greeted them with big joy, then carefully adjusted his cap like nothing could rattle him. Right beside him, Lin Bell held Tatsuya's hand so gently, and that made Tatsuya go bright red, dropping his head a little in embarrassment. Suddenly he unleashed his power, and the orc the guy had been battling crumpled to the ground, lifeless and still, right in front of them. The man and the girl stared, baffled at first by the monster's body, then by the boy, and Tatsuya was left completely lost at the way they looked. The boy, already blushing, finally blurted out that he wanted to carve the thing up. The butcher snapped that the kid's order was a little too complicated, so they'd have to wait right at the counter. Then, once he was done, the boys fell into step down that same path in total silence. Then, as embarrassment tried to swallow him whole, Tatsuya finally shoved it aside and snapped the silence, telling everyone what really happened to him today. Then he spilled every single thing that happened today to her, and once the last word left his mouth, the stars were already blazing overhead, deep, deep into the night. Lin Bell listened to his story like it was nothing, while Lin quietly slid her arms around his shoulders, resting her chin on his head. Tatsuya's face went red, stunned because they were standing way too close, so she pulled him tight to her chest. Lin Bell's eyes spilled over into tears, and before long she was sobbing. Then she spun toward the young man and blurted out that she was beyond relieved he'd come back. Then Lin Bell slapped on a proud smile and told him he was doing great. So Tatsuya froze, mouth hanging open in shock, face blazing red with embarrassment. After that, they just stood there in heavy silence, and then hugged. After a long, dark night, the next day finally rolled in, bright sunbeams streaming through the windows and waking everyone up. Tatsuya yanked the blanket up over his whole body and swore he wouldn't leave the city today. Then he suddenly froze, like a memory just slammed into his mind. The boy threw on his clothes and hurried down the stairs, while the woman cooked up breakfast and cheerfully told Tatsuya good morning. She blinked in surprise when he was up so early, and Tatsuya shot back his own good morning, making her beam right back at him. His eyes locked onto the oven. Then he whipped around to the hostess in the very same breath, ready to ask if she could use it for a little while when she got free. The woman's eyes widened, but her mind raced. What was he about to do? The guy stuffed his hands behind his back, rattled something inside them, then started pulling it into position. Tatsuya nodded and promised the hostess exactly what he was going to do. And today he's firing up the kitchen to bake sweets, and he decides this whole day is dedicated to showing gratitude. Finally, he got the green light to use the oven, and the moment it was his, he started whipping up his sweets. Then he sprinted straight to cookies, hunting down flour and butter because he'd already stocked everything else he needed. Right then, he seized the skill and dove straight into cooking sweets. Then Tatsuya lit up like crazy because he was finally holding chocolate in his own hand. And now, brace yourself. Time to cook up greatness with those natural skills. The irresistible scent of fresh cookies started flooding the city, and everyone went wild, sniffing the air, chasing that sweet mystery, and scrambling to figure out where it was coming from. The whole city snapped to attention over Tatsuya's sweets, and the mystery smell finally made sense, too. Then the butcher and the hostess stared through the door at his moves, totally baffled, until the guy realized the truth. They weren't just watching. They were spying. And now the tray was filled with little round cookies, steaming out that mouth-watering smell. Meanwhile, the guy had already lined up a fresh tray. But first, he rolled every cookie in flour. Then I shoved the next batch straight into the oven. Tatsuya couldn't stop smiling at how perfectly these cookies turned out. And suddenly the box was packed with snowball cookies, already made and ready to go, so Tatsuya slapped on the lid and sealed it up. The cookies were packed with chocolate chips and shaped nearly perfectly into balls. The guy insisted he only needed to satisfy Lin Bell, then something snapped his attention in an instant. So tell me, how hard that hostess was watching him like she could smell every secret, because he was totally thrown off. He thanked them for letting him use their oven, and after he cooked up way too much, he pushed the idea that they should taste it too. The butcher's hostess broke into a big smile right away, thrilled with the offer. She snapped that these were sweets. Then the butcher grinned and said they smelled so wonderfully sweet. He also claimed these were top-tier sweets, and he couldn't stop wondering how on earth he cooked them. Then a woman and a man each popped a cookie in their mouths, and the moment they tasted it, their eyes lit up and pure delight showed all over their faces. The hostess stared in disbelief. This had a rich, luxurious flavor, and it somehow tasted even better than the royal meal. The butcher spun around with a grin, hungry to get Tatsuya to sell him everything. But the kid froze, then said, loud and certain, that he wouldn't sell a thing. He realized his cooking hit the locals' tastes right on the nose, and it made him ridiculously happy until they slammed the sweets as luxury, revealing they barely had any sugar, and the hostess kept grilling him, trying to figure out how he pulled it off. Tatsuya still remembered the butcher cornering him to sell cookies, and for a second he even wrestled with the idea, until doubt hit. He couldn't swear they used sugar, the very sugar he crafted with pure skill, because that secret was locked tight. So yeah, now it's time to move, and not just sit there. He was racing to deliver the cookies to Lin Bell as fast as he could. Then the boy sprinted down the street and pushed his legs even harder toward the guild building. A lone girl sat at the table, eyes locked on her book, turning the pages like her life depended on it. Then she smiled like she'd found something sweet, until confusion hit her hard. She straightened in her chair, scooted toward Suya, and stared at him, reading him piece by piece. She stared at the boy, sweat-soaked, gasping for breath, and wondered what had happened, then prayed he was okay. He burst into a big smile like everything was fine, nodded right away, thanked her, and Lin Bell said it was great. Then she snatched the guy's hand right away, shocking him, and fired off, "We've all been so worried about you. Now don't push yourself too hard. And if you suddenly need my help, tell me." The boy lit up so hard for Lin Bell that his face went red as he blurted, "You're not from this world. You're an angel." Lin Bell fretted about whether that kid would really sell his loot from yesterday, and Tatsuya agreed on the spot. Then Lin Bell pointed out the paper so he knew exactly how much he'd get in total. He rushes out with up to 30 coins, so many for that monster that the kid's eyes go wide, and the moment the guy opens his mouth, pure shock hits. Lin Bell's claimed orcs were D-class monsters, so the pay for them was absurd, and that's why the trembling guy clutched a bag of money like it might vanish. He'd spent the whole week grinding for just 8 coins, then suddenly he got paid that amount all at once. But that wasn't why he was here. He'd come to thank her. Tatsuya spun toward her, and she just smiled, waiting like she already knew. Yet when the moment hit, the boy blushed even harder. A young man told her to wait just a moment, then snatched her hand and spun away from her, leaving her staring with that "what's going on" smile. Panic started to claw at him, because in all his 32 years, he'd never once handed a girl a gift. He hesitated, wondering if it was even okay to hand her the sweets. No, worse, sweets he made himself. And after he forced a shaky breath and cooled his nerves, he finally pulled himself together and got his thoughts in order. A flushed young man thrust a round, bow-tied box into Lin Bell's hands and told her it was for her. Right then, her cheeks warmed up. And honestly, he'd made this move because Lin Bell was always so kind to him. Tatsuya blushed hard, clutched the box like it was precious, and thanked Lin Bell from the bottom of his heart, begging her to take his gift. Then he popped the lid open, and inside were tons of round chocolate biscuits. The boy thrust a little treat at her, insisting they were cookies, then froze, all confused and awkward, still awkwardly gripping the box. Lin Bell stared at him in shock, mouth hanging open, utterly baffled by what he just did. Then she ripped the silence open with a scream, and every eye in the crowd snapped to her. Lin Bell blinked, realized it was a cookie, and, wow, knew it was one he'd made with his own hands. His joy exploded. Across the room, Tatsuya went even redder than a tomato from pure embarrassment, then panicked because he didn't get why his shouting drew a crowd while she shrank back and apologized so timidly. He was so embarrassed, he figured she hated sweets, but Lin Bell just smiled warmly, then shook her head hard because nope, she loved cookies more than anything. But because cookies cost a fortune, and it's her very first one, she blushed hard, yet couldn't stop smiling at the fact she was getting something that pricey. She stared at those cookies like they were pure treasure, like sweets in this world were so rare they might as well cost a fortune. The girl pointed at the cookies with a shaky frown, because she had no idea what those dark conclusions even were, while Tatsuya grinned and declared with total confidence, "Chocolate," then boasted they were absolutely delicious. She tipped her head toward the liver, sniffed it hard, and studied her answer like it might bite back. After that, she gushed that the smell was absolutely delicious, and her words totally roasted that poor guy in front of everyone. Rage boiled in his veins, and he felt totally awkward, Now I just wanted to bolt, but Lin Bell was already hooked on how he pulled it off, and Tatsuya only said, "It's a secret." He blurted out, way more mortified than before, that he'd made a whole ton of them, and she'd better eat the rest too then. While his fear was practically screaming, he kept fidgeting and randomly tapping his hands like he couldn't stop worrying. He couldn't stomach the humiliation anymore, so he blurted that he'd already run. Then Lin Bell chased after him and snapped, "Wait just a bit," because she needed to say something, and Tatsuya finally spun around and stared at her. She beamed and thanked him for going all out, trying, preparing, and handing her those chocolate cookies as a gift, and she couldn't wait to savor every bite and treasure them like gold. Lin Bell stood there clutching the box, grinning like her day had just turned sweeter. Tetsuya stormed out of the guild, muttering that it felt painfully awkward because it was the first time he'd ever handed something to a girl. Then he crouched and hugged his knees, catching random passers-by off guard, and when the moment replayed in his head, his face burned even hotter. Pride swelled in him as he thought, "I did it. I pleased her." And then he practically decided on the spot he'd cook even more. Deep into the night, the stars blazed overhead as Lin Bell hunched over her fountain pen, scribbling till she finally felt that tired pull in her bones. Then she let out a slow exhale, rolled her shoulders, and stretched her back wide. She stared at the window and saw moonlight spill through the guild. Lin Bell's stomach dropped with the realization that it was already way past time, and it was finally time to crawl into bed. Lin Bell stood on the guild's second floor, clutching her stomach as it growled, so hungry she started hunting for what she could eat. Lin Bell gasped as she peered through the doorway, only to spot the same round box with a bow on the table in the lonely guild worker's room, the one Tatsuya had given her that morning. It was the exact same cookie that made shy little Tatsuya blush when he handed it to her. Lin Bell slid up to the table and reached for the box, but a wave of nerves hit her, her face still glowing with joy and pure anticipation for every bite she couldn't wait to steal. Out of nowhere, Maru snatched her from behind, yanking her right into Lin Bell's back, and she immediately let out a terrifying scream, shouting the girl's name. Lin Bell spun around, stunned. How did Maru get back so fast? Maru said, "I just arrived." Then her eyes snapped to something, and Maru understood. Tatsuya had just handed that girl a round box tied with a bow. And she also remembered that Maru had heard Lin Bell mention cookies, so Mara immediately figured it was just some joke. But then Lin Bell never replied, and that silence totally threw Mara for a loop. The girl reached for the box, and right as it opened, Lin Bell snapped, saying she wasn't wrong at all. It was the cookies Tatsuya had made for her. Maru was still baffled, because why would Tatsuya hand Lin Bell something that expensive? Lin Bell told Mara he'd made them himself, using his own hands. That hit her like a truck, because the real shock wasn't just the gift, it was how he'd crafted it. Maru stared at the box, thinking hard, stacking up reasons and possibilities for why someone would drop something so expensive. Even getting simple cookies costs a fortune. The ingredients alone burn your wallet, and one wrong move with the recipe can wipe out your money fast. Plus, most people never even think to try making them themselves. But seriously, how do you pull off all those delicious-looking cookies? Maru whipped around to Lin and pushed his idea her way. She leaned in and asked Lin Bell straight up if Tatsuya could be the pastry chef's kid. But she shook her head hard and said she didn't buy it for a second. And even Lin Bell wasn't sure whether Tatsuya was really an adventurer. Then, boom, the door swung open, and a cute girl slid into the room, cap on her head, grinning like she owned the moment, flowers clutched in her hands as she called, "Good evening." Maru clocked it instantly. Akane was the one who'd walked up, patting herself on the win and telling him she'd done great today. Lin Bell swung around too, greeted her with a warm good evening, then spotted the bouquet in her hands and couldn't help but gush that it was absolutely gorgeous. Akane whipped out her bouquet for the girls, bragging it was a gift from some adventurer, until her eyes snapped to Lin Bell, and then her gaze got snagged by a box sitting on the table. She realized Lin Bell had gotten something too, and her face lit up as she gushed about that gorgeous box, round, wrapped tight, and topped with a bow, until Lin Bell told her it was a gift from Tatsuya. The girl let out a soft laugh and said it was basically the same as how Tatsuya had already fallen for Lin Bell. Inakone stared at him, dying to know what she was supposed to get out of it, while Maru and Lin Bell shot each other nervous looks and fell into awkward silence. Then they popped open a tiny round gift box tied with a bow, and right in front of the Kone's eyes, boom, hundreds of little round cookies sat there together in the same bow-wrapped box, showing exactly what Lin Bell got from this young man. She clocked the cookie the exact same second, and then blurted that the young man clearly loved her more than anything. Lin Bell burst out right away, saying how insanely grateful he was to her. Then he told her to go ahead and eat them with the other girls. A cane cut in, saying it was still way more than enough for Lin Bell to thank her like that. And she couldn't help but wonder where on earth he even got those things. Lin Bell hesitated, saying it felt like he'd baked those cookies himself, and Akane blew up with pure outrage. She refused to believe a word of it. Lin Bell stared at the cookies in the box with a heavy heart, and she wasn't about to believe for 1 second that Tatsuya was the kind of boy who lied. Maru backed up her friends, swearing she believed Tatsuya was telling the truth too, because she remembered the scent on him was amazing. Yet even with that, why he felt so real to her stayed a mystery. There was still a box of cookies on the table, calling the girls over, but they just froze in silence and traded nervous looks, waiting for someone, anyone, to break the ice first. But then Linville's stomach let out a loud, urgent rumble. Embarrassment hit her hard, and a hot blush crept up her face as everyone stayed stone silent, staring at Lin Bell, then darting their eyes to the cookies. Her stomach growled again, and a cane slid into her fingers, tugging them toward her mouth. Right as she snatched a cookie into her hand, she shocked the girls with a smooth, sudden move, and then she urged them to go ahead and try eating them, especially if they cooked them for her. She's convinced they have to chow down on them, no questions asked. In the dead of night, the girls couldn't resist and decided to try Tatsuya's cookies, clutching them like little dough balls while they stared at him like he was about to work magic. Then they all wished each other a tasty, pleasant appetite. Then, at the exact same moment, they flung cookies straight into each other's mouths, and the instant chocolate hit, their faces lit up with pure joy and delicious pleasure. Joy lit up the girl's face as she dug in, clearly loving every bite, and Maru sat there licking her lips like chocolate had bewitched her. And Lin Bell swore it was the tastiest thing she'd ever eaten in her whole 19 years, and even now it still tastes amazing on my tongue. Maru said this was the very first time she'd ever tasted real happiness. Her eyes shined bright as delight surged through her, and once she took those cookies, pure joy hit, and she couldn't stop smiling. Inakane said the food was so delicious it left her wiped out after work. Yet the moment she spoke, she looked totally at ease, lounging, leaning back against the chair like she owned the whole place. The cookie crumbled with a satisfying crunch, then melted into this soft, silky bite. All that rich, sweet filling flooded your mouth like a little burst of happiness. Akane stared at those dark pieces, totally baffled. Then Lin Bell grinned and said, "Looks like chocolate to me." Akane said she'd never heard of that ingredient, yet it left a delicious, bittersweet taste on her tongue. Still, Maru said she'd have to corner Tatsuya later and find out where to get it. The girls reached for yet another round of cookies, no stopping now. Their hands snatched another cookie and shoved it right back into their mouths. Then they just froze. Because it was so insanely delicious, they didn't know how to stop, getting hit with pure, unforgettable joy with every bite. They couldn't stop stuffing their faces with those insanely delicious chocolate chip cookies. Then they crammed in another batch of chocolate chip cookies, chasing that sweet but slightly bitter rush all over again, while in the room the girls tore into the cookies with loud, happy crunches. The girls spun toward Maru and argued it'd be unfair if she grabbed two at once, but Maru grinned and said she'd just balance one on each side of her mouth, so somehow it meant you could take 2 pieces each. Akane spun toward Maru and snapped that she wouldn't do it. Rules were rules, and you had to eat one at a time. Then Maru fired back instantly. Yeah, tell that to Akane, since she's eating two at once right now. She said the cookie was a bit cracked, so it still counted as one piece. And Maru and Lin Bell snapped back in unison that those were nothing but excuses. Then Maru spun toward Lin Bell, because Lin Bell had shoved another cookie into her mouth without even chewing the last one. So Maru snapped that it wasn't fair at all. But she snapped that she cares about Tatsuya the most, so it doesn't count at all. After going at it for ages, the girls kept shoving cookies into their mouths, each one trying to beat the others, until the sound of crunching carried all the way outside the guild. Then the round tin finally went empty, and not a single chocolate chip cookie was left. They started raving that it was the most delicious thing ever, and that they'd eat it like this every single day. Yet Lin Bell just stared at the smiling, well-fed girls and said nothing. She realized the chocolate chip cookies were totally gone, and Lin Bell sank into disappointment over the fact that her batch had run out completely. Maru told everyone she had to thank Tatsuya tomorrow, and Akane jumped in right beside her to back that plan. Tatsuya had the girls drooling over his cookies, and Lin Bell snapped into protective mode like, "No, I've got to take extra care of him." Then she leaned in and told the others she'd be up early tomorrow, and right after that, Akane and Maru waved her off with a warm good night. That night, Lin Bell strode under the lights with a bag on her shoulder, clutching a box of cookies like they were a treasure, because she'd just been savoring how insanely delicious they were. Then her gaze drifted, and she pressed her hand to her chin, lost in thought. A jolt hit her. Cookies are still pricey, and she couldn't wrap her head around how they'd prepared sweets just for her and somehow made her beam with joy. And yeah, she was sure Tatsuya must truly love cooking. She knew she had to tell him because this was so tasty, and deep down she couldn't ignore the truth. Lin Bell was the one who loved Tatsuya's sweets the most, and she'd already been dreaming about telling Tatsuya exactly what she thought. Morning crept in as the sun clawed its way over the horizon. Right now, the wolf kept its eyes locked on the figure closing in, all tense and dead serious, bracing in a fighting stance like a trap, just waiting for the opponent to show up. The girl moved so fast she might have been invisible, leaving nothing but dust in her wake. The wolf snapped its jaws with terrifying fury, ready to pounce the moment she flinched, while he held his ground, waiting for that exact, perfect opening to strike. But before he could lift a finger, a girl already slammed into him. The wolf didn't even get a chance to move. 1 second he was menacing, and the next he was already pinned to the ground, his powerful body suddenly useless beneath the pressure. The force of her blow made him shake hard, and a guttural, horse-like howl ripped from his mouth, foam spilling out right as the dust from the strike started to swirl away. And she just sighed, finally catching her breath after that easy battle. After a while, she finally blurted out that she was starving for something to eat. This blonde girl with 2 ponytails tied up in bow knots, plus those animal-like second ears and armored-looking gloves wrapped around her hands. Meanwhile, in the guild, Tatsuya had already shown up that morning and hung around for a while. Then suddenly someone shouted his name, and Maru came barreling in at full speed, sprinting straight toward him. The moment she sprinted up to him, she snatched his hands right away, and the poor guy froze in shock. She said his cookies were delicious, and for the first time, joy lit up her like a fireworks show. Then she turned to the boy and thanked him profusely. Panic slammed into him, and he blurted out that he wasn't grateful. Then his heartbeat shot up the moment the realization hit, his face flushing hard as he stood there, and right behind his back, someone snapped him again. This time it was Mrs. McCain. She clapped a hand over her mouth and gushed that the cookies were insanely delicious, and Tatsuya lit up and said he was thrilled they liked them that much. Suddenly the girl yanked the boy into a tight hug against her chest, and the young man instantly went bright red. Cold sweat broke out all over his face. She clutched to Kane like it was a thank you note, and the guy immediately tried to slip out of her fierce, tight hug. He couldn't figure out why they were freaking out, so he just kept handing them cookies. Then his pulse skyrocketed, and he was seconds away from fainting. Akane suddenly remembered Belle had granted him permission to wipe out the wolves, and Tatsuya snapped back that she must mean Lin Belle. She panicked. He'd just scraped into the E level, and he was still basically a kid, yet Mr. Volga pushed her to trust it, because if it was Tatsuya, then everything was going to work out. He figured Lin Belle wouldn't lose it on him if he wiped out the wolves, so now he's left scrambling, asking himself where Lin Belle is right this second. And he charged down that road right to the spot where they'd hugged just a little while ago. They grinned at each other and burst into happy greetings. Then they burst into a joyful sprint straight toward each other. Lin Belle bragged that his cookies were so delicious they wouldn't budge, and I thanked him a whole lot. Lin Belle kept clutching him tight, her warm breath sending a spark over his skin. Then his heart rate maxed out, blood pounding through his veins like crazy. He was still reeling because even Lin Belle, of all people, liked his cookies too. Tatsuya felt like his world might tip over, like he was seconds from fainting, but he begged it wouldn't happen here, because the thought of collapsing into the dirt in front of a girl this amazing felt terrifying, especially since he was pretty sure he really liked her. Tatsuya turned crimson, tongue-tied by the sight of him. Then he snapped his head toward Lin Belle. He told Lin Belle he'd heard she'd granted him permission to wipe out the wolves, and that a cane had delivered the message. Lin Belle is still freaking out about him, because just the other day, he tore through an entire orc like it was nothing. After talking with Volga, they finally agreed to give him at least one shot at taking down the wolf. And Lin Belle is dead sure he can still take them down and come out on top. But most importantly, Lin Belle leaned in and begged Tim not to push himself too hard. She made him promise, and the boy agreed. But Tatsuya knew Lin Belle was pure-hearted and always looked out for him. So when a memory hit him, he spun back to her again because he had to ask Lin Belle something else. This morning, he baked up another batch of cookies, and if she suddenly decides she wants some too, they'll all dig in together again. And Lin Belle was absolutely stunned, because it was all him again. And Lin Belle burst into apologies for what she said yesterday, but Tatsuya had already bolted away before she could finish. But he also barked after her that he'd immediately go down to defeat the wolves, while Lin Belle fought with every ounce of self-control not to devour those chocolate cookies, because she knew they were dangerously delicious. Meanwhile, the boy was already standing right at the north gate, like he'd arrived a heartbeat ahead of fate. Tatsuya clocked a huge crowd of adventurers packed right outside the gate. Past the north gate, a highway stretches out to a non-stop hotspot where monsters just love to show up, so adventurers rush there to hunt. Tatsuya trudged down a lonely path, then decided to dive into the forest because huge tree crowns and thick bushes were already towering right in front of him. He shuffled along the path, already edging off it, staring hard at the bushes, watching them twitch and move, like either the wind was playing tricks or something alive was lurking inside. Wolves started howling from the forest thicket, yipping like they were begging him to step into battle at last, and Tatsuya had only been in there for 3 full minutes. And that was more than enough to send fear crashing over him. Tatsuya started to tremble, and icy sweat broke across his face as the terror came rushing closer. And the worst part? He couldn't even see the monsters or guess when they'd ambush him, so fear clawed deeper and deeper. Then he decided to pull the rotten eggs away for a bit, just so he wouldn't accidentally crack them somewhere. Right after he slipped into the forest, he spotted something off, but he still clutched those rotten eggs in his hands, ready to smash them at wolves or any monster that dared show up. He could barely make out the enemies through his own field of vision, and in a place like this, it feels safer to stick with his crew than to march off solo and fight monsters all by himself. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly the kind of fate Tatsuya is destined to face. Stuck as a loner with no squad, no group, and no one backing him up. But then she started to wonder, could there really be a group that would take him in? Somewhere there had to be at least one, because his fighting style was nothing like the usual stuff. He didn't just fight, he hurled black liquid and rotten eggs straight from his hands. And if he could track down a crew like that, he'd be over the moon, and even more so if every single one of his teammates were beautiful girls. He decided he had to lock this idea into his memory, then come back and spill it to Lin Bell right then. A bird burst into the sky and screamed at the top of its lungs, ripping his focus away. Tatsuya's eyes snapped to it. Something was sprinting out of the forest straight at him. Then the ground shuddered under his feet, and the guy snapped to it. This had to be orcs. But this spot was way too tight, so he had no choice. He sprinted back to find a better vantage point. He spun around to confirm they were the orcs, then froze, because there were only two of them. Like hungry wolves, the orcs thundered after Tatsuya, their savage roars blasting through the forest until the trees shook. Tatsuya's heart hammered in his chest as he tore down those narrow paths, fighting to keep from getting lost. He could hear the orcs' heavy footsteps closing in, and terror snapped through his whole body. Then they broke into a run, arms flung out like they were about to grab him. Once the orcs get wind of you, thanks to what happened before, escaping won't even be on the table, so watch yourself. Tatsuya slammed the brakes, heart hammering like it wanted out of his chest, and he shot a quick apology straight to Lindell in his head. Because he finally faced the truth, he couldn't hold up his promise. He felt weak, powerless, crushed against those ferocious beasts. He cupped the rotten eggs word right into his own hand. Tatsuya figured they'd probably be drooling over him like a snack, but he was already blazing forward, determined to ruin their plans fast. Because he was the one destined to crush them in a blink-and-it's-over battle. Right then, rotten eggs started pelting the orcs like a stinking barrage. Dozens of these eggs sat there, and they were heating up right as the orcs came to life. He'll scatter them so they never get a chance. Then they'll be screaming pure rage over the stench of these eggs. The orcs went stone still, their wide faces twisted with shock and pure disgust, and Tatsuya stood there with his nose covered, stunned that they weren't roaring with rage. They stared at their bodies caked in rotten egg and broke down in tears, sobs so rough they sounded like their souls were being ripped open with pain, like these orcs were trapped in the deepest kind of despair. Tatsuya looked at them like he couldn't figure it out, then threw out the guess that maybe it was depression. It felt like those eggs had wrecked them mentally worse than anything else, so he'd pull out his other weapon next, and the orcs instantly erupted with rage. Tatsuya drizzled hot habanero sauce on everything and laughed, saying it would hype them right back up. The orcs got blasted with scorching hot sauce, then flames erupted from their mouths, while tears poured from their eyes. Orcs were falling apart, howling in tears as sweat poured down their faces, while scorching hot sauce kept pelting them. Their huge, bulging muscles twisted under a disgusted grimace, and their eyes streamed non-stop. Tatsuya smirked like a genius, flinging the sauce in wild, new directions, and for a moment the kid felt unstoppable, like nothing could ever touch him. The orcs were hanging on by sheer muscle, claws snapping at nothing as they tried to snatch the air. But just like that, they crumpled to the ground, drained of every last ounce of strength. Tatsuya closed in fast, grinning as he realized he could take down two orcs at once. Then the agile kid yanked his hair back, squared up, and blared, "That's it!" That young man felt power surging through him. He'd just wrecked two orcs, and now he's stuck, trying to figure out how on earth to tell Lin Bell. Her voice cut through the air behind him. This was the same girl who'd battled the wolves, and she'd just called this guy impossibly strange. The boy couldn't even pin down who was here, panicking that whoever it was must have spotted him. A charming girl burst out of the forest, snatching a young man's attention the second she appeared, her silhouette slipping between the trees, and Tatsuya just stared, totally forgetting the orcs he'd wiped out only minutes ago. She kept calling him weird, her voice sweet as music and edged with a teasing little smirk, while Tatsuya had no clue why she was talking like that. He couldn't help getting pulled in by this mysterious girl who slid into his life so effortlessly. She said it again. He was strange, her voice teasing just a little, but her words held zero cruelty. Tatsuya's face burned with embarrassment the moment they called him that, yet he couldn't wrap his head around why. He didn't know who she was, but she looked stunning, yet she kept calling him weird, and he couldn't help noticing how busty she was. The girl swore she'd spotted him. The girl said his fighting style felt downright eerie, like something was off. Tatsuya's stomach dropped when he realized that she'd watched him wipe them out with nothing but spices. And he knew it. His fighting style was one of a kind, impossible to deny. But when she said it so bluntly, it still stung like a punch. She claimed he was making some weird liquid or an egg, and she was determined to figure out exactly what it was. He didn't think she realized how rare that skill was, and it stung his pride, so he scrambled to cover it up. Then he blurted, like it was fate, that he just happened to have them on him. The girl stared back at him, eyes narrowing with pure suspicion. The guy finally decided it was time to crush the orcs, like he was ready to finish them for good, while the girl stared at him like he must have had a magic bag. But the guy shot that down. It's just a box of stuff. The girl instantly got it all and declared it a rare skill. Tatsuya just couldn't wrap his head around what a magic bag even was, and the girl's eyes widened like, "You mean you don't know?" She started explaining. Right away, this thing strapped to her waist is a magic bag, like a pocket item drawer, except whatever she stores in it doesn't get time-warped or aged. He was testing his limits, trying to see how much he could carry. Then the girl snapped back, "About 2 average orcs." Tatsuya stopped and stared, thinking it through, because the bag wasn't big enough for that box, and what was inside felt like some otherworldly thing. Her stomach let out a loud, growling rumble, like it couldn't wait another second. She looked starving, clutching her stomach like it was about to betray her, trying so badly to make sure nobody heard those loud hunger sounds. Then they locked eyes and just stared, like the whole world vanished. That girl kept her eyes on Tatsuya, begging for something to happen, and then she slid in close, right within his reach. The girl gasped that she was starting to vanish from hunger. Then she catches a sweet scent, and the guy immediately misreads it, thinking she's basically telling him she's got food. The girl said that back when she saved the family from the demon's attack, they stared at her like they hadn't eaten in days, so she gave them everything she had. He was about to hand her cookies, so we jumped in and offered her some first, bragging that he had a whole bunch. Then she agreed on the spot. He slipped her a single cookie to taste, and the girl's eyes snapped open in instant, stunned surprise. She stared at what they handed her, sniffed it once, and Tatsuya realized she'd likely never seen a thing like that before, so every instinct told her to stay on guard. So he grabbed the cookies, proved they were edible, and chowed them down right in front of her. He took a bite, then smiled at her curious stare like, "Bet you see it now." He proved his point, and prayed she'd notice just how crisp they were. The girl, totally charmed by his grin, stared back at him. And then I couldn't resist anymore, so I went for it. She took one bite, and the joy on her face practically shouted, "I love this." Then, right as a hand shot out to him, he seized the moment and asked what she thought about the cookie. Her eyes sparkled like she'd just tasted heaven, because those cookies were insanely good. Then she stretched out her hand and demanded more. He grinned and said yes, then handed her even more cookies. He figured she must be loving them. She tore into chocolate chip cookies like it was pure bliss, holding one in each hand, and then blurted out that she wanted more. After a bit, the girl sank down onto the grass, and the guy slid in right beside her. She took one bite and bragged it was delicious, then stuffed herself so full she couldn't breathe. The girl stared at the guy, and he shot her a surprised look right back. She grabbed the cookies, thanked him hard, and then bragged she was a B-ranked adventurer, and her name was Suzu. He couldn't believe it. She was rocking a B rank, and her strength was unreal, so he quickly snapped out of it and introduced himself. "I'm an E-rank adventurer." But the girl couldn't stop herself. She crawled right up to him, close enough to stare him down like he was some brand new species, and Tatsuya just froze, utterly clueless about what she was doing. Susu calls Tatsuya weird, so she decides to tail him. And Tatsuya is left baffled, like, why does she even need to do that? No way she wasn't headed somewhere. She snapped her arm up and pointed straight ahead, like she knew exactly where to go. Then she blurted out she was headed straight for Frieza, and that's exactly why they decided to team up and go together. Outside, the sun blazed, and the air smelled like a fresh, pine-filled forest day, and Tatsuya and Suzu strode down the path in stubborn silence. And that's when he decided to dig up the truth, what dragged her all the way to Frisia. She told everyone, "Frisia is my homeland," and she'd been stuck in the capital for ages. She hadn't come back in forever. He figured out that the free show was happening in her hometown, and then it hit him. For some reason, Susu looked like someone he knew. He couldn't pin down who, but her face felt painfully familiar. She didn't get why he was staring at her like that, her brows knit together as if she could read his mind. Then Tatsuya's face snapped red with embarrassment, and he blurted, "It's nothing." Right after that, her hair started to shift, and it looked like it was forming ears. She spun around for no reason at all, clamped her mouth shut, and then finally said, "Something's there." They stared down a deserted road. Then, out of nowhere, an orc strolled in, calm as day as it crossed the field. He had no clue there was another orc lurking nearby, and it was way out there, so far that it didn't make sense. He couldn't figure out how she even found out, until Susu shrugged and said, it was just intuition. Then she added that she'd take care of it, while the girl stared at something with blazing eyes, like she was about to wipe him off the map. Tatsuya was completely lost, and helplessness crushed him. She dropped to all fours, twisted with that smooth, cat-like grace, and slipped away into the dark, leaving him with zero clue where she went. Meanwhile, Tatsuya was still stuck trying to get the truth out. They were only a few miles away. They've got to bolt before anyone spots them, yet the girl already took off, and it totally shocked him. The girl shot forward at a breakneck pace, shredding the air into violent wind pulses and looping circles beside her, so wild it almost looked like a dust-covered pipe, woven together by those swirling rings. Tatsuya snapped to the fact she was crawling on all fours, still ripping through the air at insane speed. Then Suzuflu hurled herself straight toward the orc like a cheetah, blazing forward with deadly grace. The moment the girl came into view, his eyes snapped wide with shock. He never thought Susu would be right beside him so fast. There wasn't even a hint of fear in her gaze, just raw, unstoppable rage that made the orc squirm. A blinding light burst near the orc, and right then a girl materialized out of nowhere. The orc swung his bat for her, but she'd already leapt back out of reach. She dropped onto her haunches like a dancer, all smooth control and razor precision, leaving the orc stunned at just how fast and agile she was. The orc lunged right behind her, but the girl snapped a punch to his face at the exact same instant, and he started coughing hard from the hit. He reeled, trying to strike back, yet she was way too quick and slippery to catch. Tatsuya caught the impact like a thunderclap, stunned by the sheer force. Then the girl snapped her leg through the swing. Then she snapped her fist into motion and swung hard. Her crushing punch slammed into his torso, folded him in half, and sent him skimming just above the ground. York felt awful. Sweat poured down his face, his mouth hung open, and his tongue shot out as he panted like he needed air right now. Then, out of nowhere, he crashed down lifeless, with no sign he'd even breathe again, while Tatsuya sprinted over, stunned to see she'd already handled everything for him. Then he leaned in and told Susa she was incredible, stunned at how deadly her skills were, because beating an orc with nothing but brute strength is brutally hard. The guy told the girl she was amazing, and that's exactly what it means to be a B-rank adventurer. Then the girl just went silent, leaving Tetsuya staring and wondering, even as he couldn't help feeling proud about her new rank and her skills. After a moment, Susie spun around and admitted she wasn't that cool at all. Then her cheeks burst into a full blush. Tatsuya's cheeks flared, because the real shock wasn't her reaction. It was that she was embarrassed. and he thought it was ridiculously sweet. Then the girl jabbed her finger at the orc and told Tatsuya to take it off, and he agreed on the spot. He shot his hand toward the work, and just like that, it vanished. The girl smiled and said they were free to go, and he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that somehow they'd been woven into the same group all along. Tatsuya decided to reach out to Suzu, convinced she'd be dying to form a group together. She dodged his question, right when her stomach growled again, and without hesitation, she demanded more cookies. Tatsuya shot an awkward smile to the side, and the boy in front of him stared at her with a guilty little grin. Then his thoughts started spiraling. The boy stared at the girl as she said she was tired, and he couldn't stop wondering why he was so obsessed with seeing her defenseless. Suzu flopped onto the table with her body sprawled out, and Tatsuya's eyes snapped straight to her. Then he yanked his gaze away and blushed so hard it burned, totally stunned that it even happened. A few hours ago, Tatsuya and Suzu stood shoulder to shoulder right outside the entrance of a massive building. The boy stayed quiet for a beat, then spun back to the girl behind him and asked, "Are you really coming with me to the guild?" And she nodded, certain and firm. Tatsuya stared at the bewildered girl, thinking, what happens if I bring Suzu to the guild? And then he pictured Lin Bell's jaw dropping, like she'd immediately fire off, "So, what's your relationship with her?" He figured the girl only sees him as a younger brother, so maybe she'll finally snap out of it and start viewing him like someone from the opposite sex, not just a kid. Then Suzu cut right through his thoughts, asking what he was doing, and told him to come inside. Confused out of his mind, Tatsuya blurted to the girl as she already yanked the guild building door open. Tatsuya and Suzu burst onto the scene in front of the girl, and the boy froze in a daze. Lin Bell stood right there, gripping a stack of papers like they weighed a ton, and she looked completely baffled too. So in pure panic, you realize they've just collided instantly. He starts blabbing excuses to Lin Bell, claiming that girl just happened to be in the forest. Then right in the middle of it, he gets cut off. Lin Bell shot them a question about why they were together, and that instantly left Tatsuya baffled, so he demanded what the girl was even getting at. He couldn't wrap his head around it, why she called both of them Suzu. And the moment Suzu nodded, she jumped in and told the girl they only met by sheer chance. Suzu snapped her head toward her little sister and told her the same words she'd said at home. Then the boy's world flipped upside down with shock. He nearly choked on the shock. She'd just called Lin Bell my sister. They froze there, staring across the counter in complete silence. Tatsuya wheeled toward Suzu and asked if that girl was her sister. Then Suzu just nodded, silent as stone, refusing to say a word. Lin Bell stepped in and answered for Suzu, saying the girl was meant to get back from King's Landing in 2 years, while Tatsuya just kept grinning, still reeling from the shock of the girl's resistors. He still remembered how, the moment he landed in this other world, Lin Bell had become his first real friend. Yet he couldn't even wrap his mind around Suzu being her sister. Then it hit him out of nowhere. Tatsuya clenched his fists in pure delight, convinced this was fate, until Suzu suddenly turned to Lin Bell and blurted that the boy was strange. Suzu blurted out that the cookies were super tasty, and then Lin Bell asked if she'd eaten them too, because Suya's homemade cookies just tasted too good. Suzu stared at the guy in pure shock and blurted out if those cookies were truly made by hand, and Tatsuya awkwardly, nervously nodded. The girl blurted that he was getting weirder and weirder, and Lin Bell rushed in to apologize for her sister, then praised Tatsuya for cooking sweets and asked if he could handle regular food too. Right then, he started to feel like something was off. He told the girl he could cook his own food, and Lin Bell leaned in and asked what he was making. After thinking for a beat, Tatsuya shot back that he was cooking steaks and omelets, and the girls were seriously blown away. Lin Bell blurted out what she wanted, meat on a steak. The man's eyes went wide, and Suzu shot back, "Can that kid cook it from the orc meat we just killed?" Tatsuya paused, then said, "Yeah, if I had a kitchen." Right then, the girls shot their arms out and cheered that they'd lend him the kitchen. The boy stared at them and basically guessed, "You two are steak people." Then he turned to the girls and asked, "So what am I getting cooked?" Out of nowhere, the sisters decided to cook a steak. Suzu and Lin Bell clapped and cheered like it was the best surprise ever, and Tatsuya couldn't help but think it was just ridiculously sweet how happy they were. Suddenly, Tatsuya's mind flashed, "Wait, does this mean we're finally going home to the girls?" He was still convinced this was a divine sign when, out of nowhere, someone called him. Lindell flashed an intimidating grin at the guys and demanded to know what they really meant by that orc they'd just wiped out. Panic slammed into Tatsuya as he realized they'd basically found themselves, and Lin Bell didn't miss a thing either. He started blurting nonsense, and Suzu cut right through it by saying the 2-orc game the boy had been playing lately. Tatsuya snapped out, calling the girl's name, totally lost. Lin Bell snapped the guy's name out like a warning, and he ducked his head asking what was going on, while the girl repeated exactly what she'd told him. So there he was. This boy got scolded right in front of Suzu. The girl shut the door tight and figured everything was fine. Then Suzu leaned in and asked Lin Bell if the job was done. She nodded yes, and with that, they headed back home. After a while, the guys finally found themselves standing right before the massive house's entrance. Suzu blurted out that they were headed there, and Lin Bell nodded like, "Yeah, it's an old house, so expect it to feel a bit rough." For the first time in his 32 years of life, Tatsuya kept replaying one thought. He was really heading to a girl's house. He pictured Suzu leading him to the bathroom and Lin Bell changing clothes right there, and I couldn't help but drift off, wondering if something like that could actually happen. But his mind got yanked away when the girls called his name and beckoned him inside, so he awkwardly blurted, "Sure," and followed. They burst into the house. He quickly apologized for the trouble, then thought, what if I just stumbled into the house of 2 angels? The boy scanned the room and figured the girl must have meant it was old, but everything looked spotless, clean, and perfectly neat. Tetsuya leaned in as Lin Bell told Suzu she never leaves clothes on herself, and the boy grinned, thinking, "Yeah, I knew it. Lin Bell is the real deal." Lin Bell shoved the boy toward the door and told him, "That's the living room." Then she rushed off to get dressed, hissing, "Wait here for a minute. Don't move." Tatsuya grinned to himself, picturing Lin Bell dressed up. Then he burst into the living room and stopped cold, because something was there. His eyes locked onto a girl whose painfully short outfit showed off more than just her legs and chest. Suzu slumps at the table, stretching her arm with all her might, desperate to grab whatever's just out of reach. He couldn't even focus on where he was going because the girl's super-revealing outfit kept stealing his attention, so he hurried up to a chair and asked if he could sit there, and she just nodded, letting him in. Tatsuya glanced around again and couldn't believe it. This was a whole mansion of a living room for just 2 people. Suzu sat there, and then, boom, an awkward silence snapped in half as a voice cut through. Lin Bell hurried out an apology for making them wait. Tetsuya stared at the girl in her dress and started sparring over Lin Bell while she was still in her home clothes, and honestly, he loved every second of it. Tatsuya also realized his eyes now had even more chances to feast. Then he shot to his feet and declared he'd be taking over the kitchen. Lin Bell grinned and happily nodded like it was destiny. The boy darted into the kitchen, scanned everything, and immediately figured she'd stocked it like a pro, with every utensil ready to go. He cracked open his skill window and saw it. Yet another jump in how many condiments he could make. On the list were ketchup, mayonnaise, and instant coffee, while the sweets came with fragrant coffee too. Suddenly the girl shouted his name and he shot to the window, slamming it open as he answered her call. Lin Bell burst into the kitchen, bragging that she had a mountain of vegetables if the guy needed them, hiding them under the table, and the boy immediately grilled the girl about what was in there. He stared right at the exact spot and boom, found the vegetables. Inside the box sat carrots, potatoes, and onions stacked to the brim. So many veggies, there was no way one person could ever get through them all. Katsuya grabbed the vegetable thinking, with this seasoning, I can turn it into something amazing. He grabbed the pot, swore he'd use every last bit, and went for the win, trying to impress both girls at once. The boy poured water into a saucepan, tossed the veggies onto the stove, and boiled the potatoes in their skins first. Then he grabbed the board and started chopping onions and carrots, one sharp slice at a time. Tatsuya tossed chopped vegetables into the pan, then leaned in like a chef. Carrots needed to turn just a little tender. Then he peeled boiled potatoes, mashed them into a smooth puree, and stirred them together with the cooked vegetables. After that, the boy fired off his skill and whipped up mayonnaise, slicking the vegetables over and over like a proper secret weapon. Now toss in the salt and pepper until it hits just right. Tatsuya whipped up the potato salad, and everything was set for the side dish. Then the boy grabbed a huge bowl and slid it straight into the refrigerator. Now he cracked into the main course, orc meat, and yanked out a huge, fresh chunk like it was prize food. Then he grabbed the orc meat and hacked it into thick slices. Tatsuya followed up by showering it with salt and pepper. The boy dropped the meat into the pan, fired up a gentle, medium-low heat, and covered it with a lid, cooking it slowly and carefully till it was right. Then he shut off the heat and brought the dish straight to the table. At the end, Tatsuya used his skill to pour that perfect sauce right over the sizzling meat. Then you lay it all on the steaks and let the flavor hit. The boy grilled a monster-thick steak made from an orc, then marched out to the girls, thanking them in loud, heartfelt words for waiting. He hurriedly set the table and slammed down a huge bowl stacked with side dishes and thick orc steaks, and when Susu and Lin Bell stared at the feast with wide-eyed excitement, Lin Bell blurted, "Are we sure it's really okay to eat this?" And the boy shot back, "Yeah, it's totally fine." Susu stared at the side dish and demanded to know what it was, and Tatsuya grinned and said it was a potato salad. Lin Bell leaned in, asked about it, then burst out that it looked insanely delicious, so they dove in and started eating. The girls were buzzing with excitement. Suzu had already snatched the appliances, and Lin Bell leaned in and wished her a delicious meal. With a delighted squeal, Susu jammed her fork into a juicy, thick orc steak and snatched it right back up. The girl tore into that huge piece of meat, dug in with hungry chomps, and bright sparkle flooded her eyes as she chewed. She took her time, sliced the meat into tiny bites, then speared one with her fork and started chewing like she meant business. Susu stared in total shock as the steak turned out so soft and juicy it practically melted, and the girls burst out about how insanely delicious it was, while Lin Bell chewed on an orc steak, tears streaming down her face as she got lost in the taste, letting the meat fill every inch of her mouth. Tatsuya thought they'd like it, and his relief hit hard, so he leaned in and told the girls to try the potato salad too, then piled it into their bowls until they overflowed. Susu scooped lettuce into her spoon with care, then shot him a look. Right then, the girl glanced at her sister. Both nodded together and tipped the spoons into their mouths. They muttered something under the light after tasting the boy's potato salad. Lin Bell leaned in and asked, "Is it really a salad for sure?" She swore it was so soft, flaky, sweet, and tangy, and the crazier part? The more you ate, the quicker your taste adjusted. With her mouth stuffed, Susu blurted out that it was insanely delicious, and once she started, she couldn't stop eating. Tatsuya's eyes widened at the girl's reaction. Then he grinned and said, "Don't worry, there's still plenty left. We're about to eat good." They dug into his food with zero chill, and Tatsuya just couldn't wrap his head around how hard they were loving it. So honestly, all that cooking time was worth it, because watching girls eat was straight up the cutest thing in the world. Suzu was chewing her food hard when she suddenly tried to speak, and everyone froze in silence as they listened. Then she called out to her little sister. Susu blurted that the boy was strange, and that's when she decided she had to pull him into a group with her. Lin Bell spun toward the girl, eyes blazing in shock, and demanded what she meant, while Tatsuya stood there stunned too, because they couldn't wrap their heads around Susu actually talking about the band. Outside, night had already swallowed everything. Suzu shouted to the man, and for some reason, panic snapped onto him instantly. If you're curious how he landed in a mess like this, he'll explain it.
The girl snapped, "Hurry up, if you don't, I'm walking out without you."
The answer to that question was as clear as day. The guy got trapped between life and death, shaking with fear as he sat on a log right over a deadly drop. Then the girl snapped, "If you stand up and run, you'll make it faster." Just a few hours ago, they were still trapped in the city. Lin Bell fired a question at the guys. "What's the name of your band?" Susu stared at the boy and told him this was just a temporary crew, so no name was needed. She only cared about one thing: keeping him safe. Tatsuya froze at her words, then demanded why she wanted to watch him. Suzu just shrugged and said it was because he was suspicious, with a wild, off-the-wall fighting style. And even stranger, the food he cooks is ridiculously good. Lin Bell flashed a grin, weighed her thoughts for a split second, and then leaned in to speak. She told me, "When you really think about it, Tatsuya's not the villain. He'll cut down orcs, sure, but he's got his own weird charm. And the sweets he makes are so good her cheeks nearly popped off." That twist totally caught the girl off guard, so she rushed to Lin Bell, and Lin Bell shot back that her cheeks were totally fine. Tatsuya saw it as his opening to get closer to know Suzu. He figured that if they teamed up, I'd be one of those exclusive chefs hauling the goods, and he was pushing to finish the job for both of us. SAC. Tatsuya pictured Susu ordering him to haul off the dead orcs, then firing off, "I'm starving, got any cookies?" And yeah, the guy did whatever she said. He even pictured her smiling and thanking him, and in his head he vowed to level up from a temporary crew to a real permanent team. Maybe, just maybe, even date Suzu. The girl opened her mouth to thank him, but both of them brushed her off like she didn't matter. Suzu yanked him out of his thoughts by shouting his name, and the fact she was standing right there hit him like a shock. Then she cut straight to it. They had a task, so it was time to move. Suzu and Tatsuya's crew hopped into the carriage and launched into the journey. The boy sat there realizing this was his first time ever riding a cart, while Susu muttered that this ride wasn't exactly comfy. She blurted his name, then fired a question at him, where Tatsuya was from, and it hit him so hard he didn't know what to say. Tatsuya shot back, "Why'd you ask me that out of nowhere?" And she answered, "I know our group won't last, but I want to know you better." The guy figured he couldn't say Japan, another world, or anything like that, so he went with the truth. It was a rural place in the east, and that's where he came from. She said she understood, and then the air turned awkward as they went silent, and they rode side by side, Tatsuya thinking how lucky he was that Susu didn't seem all that interested. At some point, the girl pressed her weight against him, and he flicked his eyes toward Susa, who looked like she was seconds away from drifting off. He figured she'd nodded off, looked totally helpless in her sleep, and decided no matter what, to wake her the moment they pulled up. They bounced along in the carriage for a bit, then Tatsuya's eyes fluttered shut, and he dozed off. And just like that, he leaned his head against the girl's shoulder. While he slept, Tatsuya snapped awake when someone called his name, and he cracked his eyes open just enough to drool. He finally realized he'd been lying on that girl the whole time, right there while she told him they'd already arrived. Tatsuya barked out a loud shout, then blurted out an equally loud apology, and Susu waved it off, saying it was totally fine since the boy wasn't heavy at all. After what felt like forever, the guys finally rolled up to a tiny village surrounded by fields, except the ground looked wrecked, trampled flat like something nasty had been stomping around for hours. And Tatsuya couldn't help but wonder, did the monsters do this? Susu and Tatsuya marched up to a massive old house, staring as the giant doors loomed over them. The girl tiptoed to the door and knocked softly. Then an old man swung it open, nodded at the guests, and asked the guys who they were. Suzu flashed a grin and said she was a fire cat, an adventurer with B-rank clout, then told them they'd been summoned on her request and shoved her guild card into the man's hands. His eyes widened at her words. He stared at the card like it might explode, then asked again, demanding to know where Suzu's nickname came from. Tatsuya had no clue Suzu was the one they called a fire cat, and when an old man barked that they needed to summon the whole village right now, people nearby, shaking with curiosity, started shouting Suzu's name. Tatsuya couldn't believe Suzu was that famous, but before his thoughts even finished, the man swung the house doors open and shouted for the girl to come inside. He stared at the boy and told his companion to step inside too. Then Tatsuya blurted out that he was an adventurer as well, trying to sell himself on the spot. But the locals burst in with non-stop questions, demanding to know if that lady Firecat was really here. Suzu and Tatsuya sat crammed at a tiny table right in front of the headman, while the locals hovered close by, watching everything. After that, Tatsuya got word of the chaos. 3 silver wolves stormed the village, raiding the fields and food warehouses, and turning every hunt into a nightmare. So they marched straight to the Adventurers Guild and begged them to wipe out the silver wolves. As the guy laid out the whole problem, Tetsuya's mind snapped to an idea. So yeah, every single person in the village is wiped out, like they're running on fumes, and you can bet it's because they're not sleeping worth a damn at night. Suzu listened to the residents' words, nodded as if everything finally clicked, and said that starting that very night, they'd begin surveillance. Tatsuya leaned in and demanded what a silver wolf even looked like, since he'd never seen one before. Then the girl shot back, asking if the boy truly didn't know. She said he's silver refer, 3 times bigger than a normal wolf, and way smarter too. Suzu said those words, at least that's what she thought, like they were some kind of dog's curse. And Tatsuya instantly figured everything would be okay as long as Suzu stayed in his life. They stepped outside and the headman leaned towards Suzu and told her the Lady Firecat would handle everything next. Just as he opened his mouth to talk about the residents, Suzu cut him off, blurted the boy's name, and stopped him cold. She cornered Tatsuya and demanded 20 kilograms of orc meat, and when he blinked, he just couldn't help asking, "Why do you need that?" Even though he'd already guessed, he still nodded along, using his space to back up the girl's words. He snapped his hand forward and a massive hunk of fresh orc meat slammed into view in front of them, leaving the residents utterly baffled. Suzu said the words were hard to swallow because she couldn't manage all this food, so she asked them to please take some off. People on the streets cheered for Suzu and bombarded her with the same question, "Is it really true?" Tatsuya was sure nobody could spot him, and he couldn't ignore it. This girl was the unmistakable heroine of the village. Tatsuya started picturing how he could help the village. Then he shot his hand forward like he could already pull out a massive lump of salt. With a shaky voice, he blurted out to the girl. She spun around and looked at him, while Tatsuya stood by a mountain of salt, realizing he might have made way too much. The boy blurted out, confused, that it was rock salt, and he even had plenty, so if the residents needed it, they could just grab it. The headman stared at him in sheer disbelief. After that, the residents erupted in cheers, screaming that the precious salt was finally here. The last time they tasted it had been years ago. The villagers started chanting that this boy was the master of rock salt, and he just kept screaming, trying to introduce himself, only to realize they adored salt here. While the villagers showered Lady Firecat and the rock salt master with praise, Suzu stared at the boy and demanded to know where he'd scored all that salt. Tatsuya stumbled through a nervous smile at the girl, and when she flinched in embarrassment, he finally blurted out, "I knew he was weird all along." The night's already down in the village, and Suzu snaps her skill alive. Sparks flare into a fireball blazing from her own arm. After Suzu and Tatsuya handed out the orc meat and salt, they tore through the area and slipped into the nearby forests. Then the boy spotted the spots by the fields where footprints showed up the most. Tatsuya crouched in the bushes and quizzed the girl, asking if keeping watch was really that hard, like so hard it would swallow the whole night. Then he stared at her with sharp, curious interest. Suzu nodded along with that guy, convinced the girl could be an amazing adventurer just because she stayed locked in on the mission. The guy suddenly realized a real adventurer can't run on luck alone. He needs solid support. So he decided to cook something for Suzu to keep him wide awake. Tatsuya weighed it all in his mind, then spun toward Suzu and told her he'd be gone for a while. Suzu nodded and agreed. The boy yelled for a cup and a kettle of boiling water, then bragged that it felt so smart, tucking a few extra things into the box with the goods, just in case. Tatsuya stared out his window at a display of instant coffee, then fired up his cooking and tossed in a pinch of sugar to make it sweet. Then he poured hot water, and it turned out to be coffee. He breathed in that rich smell and said it was super soothing, but the boy still wanted to add something else. He stumbled into this sweet little section, chocolate, sugar, and cream stacked together, exactly what he'd been craving. Back then, Suzu was still crouched in the bushes, locked in, watching everything unfold. Out of nowhere, the girl caught a strange scent and tilted her head, confused. Then Tatsuya blurted, "Suzu!" and her ears shot up like she'd been called to the center of the storm. Tatsuya slid up to her with a tray and asked, "Want to keep up your surveillance, coffee, cream, and cookies?" The girl asked if coffee with cream was some special drink, and Tatsuya grinned, saying it was the perfect way to stay awake all night. She snatched up a steaming cup, took a quick sip, then her eyes snapped wide open. Suzu's face still held streaks of cream, and she shook from head to toe, then burst her mouth open with an ecstatic cry. Sue blinked in shock, tasted the coffee, and gasped. It was delicious, with a sharp little bitterness that hit just right. The guy grinned because she liked it. Sue stared in silence at the whipped cream. Then she blurted, "Everything's fine," and the guy froze, completely lost. Suzu cupped the cup in her hands and said exactly what she needed to say. Then Tatsuya stared at her, mortified. The boy lunged to call the girl by her name. Just like that, a loud noise erupted out of nowhere, and every eye snapped to it instantly. The guys burst out from behind the bushes, scanning for trouble. Then a wolf came into view. Tatsuya snapped the girl's name, pressed a finger to his lips, and hissed that she already knew. She blurted that they were here, and when she said it, 6 of them were suddenly there, silver wolves snapping into existence right in front of the guys. While the guys peeked from behind the bushes, silver wolves kept pouring in, one after another, until the scene erupted. They erupted into furious howls, screaming into the night. The girl spun toward Tatsuya and snapped that he better not come any closer. Suzu snapped out that she'd take down 3 of them in the blink of an eye, then she surged forward like lightning. She bolted out to the wolves, and Tatsuya mentally snapped after her, yelling that she was being wildly reckless. The silver wolves snapped their focus onto the girl and snarled low, ready to pounce. Suzu snapped her fist forward and slammed it straight into the silver wolf's muzzle. With a single, earth-shaking punch, the wolf got launched into the air and vanished from sight. She figured the first one had it coming. Then another wolf crept in from behind and closed the distance fast. The silver wolf lunged for the girl, but the second she clocked him, she slipped aside like she'd seen it coming. Why did the wolf get rattled? Suzu snapped into action and struck him fast. The second one was already there when another wolf came charging at her, jaws blazing wide. She felt it coming in the split second. Suzu spun around at lightning speed, so the wolf's swipe came up empty because it couldn't grab the girl in time. Then she snapped forward and drove a quick punch straight into his face. The other 2 silver wolves crouched in the bushes, watching like shadows. Then they all slipped away at once. The girl whipped around and shouted the boy's name. Tatsuya shot a quick glance from behind the bushes. Then Suzu blurted that she'd take those 2 down, leave the third to him, and told him to take his time. Tatsuya sprinted too, but he bolted the other way, nodding along with the girl as he went. Tatsuya sprinted and glanced away, trying to spot the silver wolf. Then a monster exploded out of the bushes and slammed into him. The boy spun around and his breath caught. Right in front of him, the silver wolf's giant jaws were charging fast. Tatsuya sprang aside in a blur just in time to keep the silver wolf from tearing into the bewildered boy. Tatsuya fixed his eyes on the wolf and braced himself, like he saw the ambush coming, while the boy had no clue it was even on the way. The silver wolf roared at the boy and charged straight at him, Tatsuya snapped to the truth. It wasn't warning him, it was coming to attack. Tatsuya snapped his hand out and unleashed his skill. Rotten eggs exploded into a swirling volley around him. The boy shot out eggs so fast they snapped into a rock-solid barrier. The stink totally crippled the wolf that got hit, and Tatsuya slammed his hand over his nose. He was so hit by the smell he nearly puked. And because of that, he finally struck down the wolf. Tatsuya pressed his hand over his nose and thought, "So the silver wolf is gone." But then something felt horribly wrong. His eyes burned and watered. He couldn't even tell what that smell was, and if it made a man like him feel sick, you know it was bad. He started to wonder if he'd gotten stronger, then yanked his window open in a hurry. Tatsuya stared in shock. Every indicator refused to budge, and everything sat exactly the same, like nothing had happened at all. His nose still plugged shut. He spotted a message flashing that a status correction was happening, and only 40 minutes were left, but he had no clue when it all began. The boy could barely stay upright, his thoughts stuck on how foul the air was, and all he could think was, "I've got to clean this place up and get rid of the wolf." When Suzu came back to him, Tatsuya yanked the wolf's body away in seconds, and she immediately clocked it. He'd beaten the wolf. Tatsuya even agreed with what she said, and when she pointed out how strange it all felt, it hit him. He was genuinely stunned he'd won. Tatsuya spun around and told the girl she was strange too. After all, she's insanely strong, and that alone feels weird. Those words hit, and Suzu quietly stared at the guy right in front of her. Then she answered with a cool, steady line about what it really means to both be cranks, and Tatsuya nodded along, fully on board. Tatsuya and Suzu sprinted back to the village and announced the job was finished, and the headman bowed with a sincere apology for the mismatch between what was asked and how many wolves actually showed up, while the villagers cheered and thanked them for bringing peace back at last. The next day, Tatsuya and Suzu tore out of the village, determined to head back to Frisha. The goblin crouched in the bushes, baton clenched in his hands, and a brutal strike slammed into his face as he snarled in pure rage. Suzu pointed out that this place was crawling with goblins, and sure, Frisia was reachable by wagon, but they ditched the ride and trekked on foot because Suzu insisted it was way safer. Tatsuya snapped his gaze to the girl and joked that she fights like a cat, then pressed her about whether any beastmen run in her family. She shook her head and said people call her cat-like all the time. Suzu admitted she'd gotten in trouble before for licking her sister's ears. And yeah, she still couldn't resist. Tatsuya pictured Lin Bell losing her mind, screaming at the girl to stop, and he couldn't help thinking he'd actually love to see it. The boy asked the girl if she could use every kind of magic, and Suzu snapped that she couldn't. She only had fire magic in her. Tatsuya finally understood why the villagers gave her that name. Suzu fired the same question at the boy, and she couldn't stop wondering what magic was hiding inside him, especially the kind he used to wreck everyone in battle. Tatsuya fumbled and scratched the back of his head, then blurted that he didn't have real magic at all. He just pulled it straight out of the item box, and the girl froze, suddenly thinking hard. The boy figured yesterday got even stronger when he raised the status, and then he started wondering, wait, do people treat rotten eggs like magic? Suddenly, Suzu blared, "Wait!" and lunged up to grab the boy by the arm, leaving him stunned. Tatsuya was mortified, cheeks blazing red from everything he'd done, and he blurted out, "Why are you suddenly acting like this?" Suzu glanced that way with sharp interest and told the boy, "Come on, look over there too." In the clearing up ahead, not far from the guys, strange creatures swarmed by the dozens. Tatsuya's brain couldn't make heads or tails of what he was even seeing. He blurted out, totally confused if it was a bird, and the girl nodded like, "Yeah." Then she leaned in and declared it was a popo bird, even though they kinda look like chickens. These birds have status. They're tough as nails, but they still freeze up at the sight of water. And Suzu even slips in one more killer detail. They're downright delicious. She clutched the boy by the arm and stared at the birds like she was about to devour them. Tatsuya then asked if those were her favorite treats, and he snapped at her to let go, or she'd nearly break his hand. Then Tatsuya said the cue, and they kicked into action right on schedule. He shot out his hand and unleashed his skill. Tatsuya flicked soy sauce straight over the birds' heads. With a grin tugging at his face, he swore he'd unleash a delicious rain of soy sauce for the birds. The birds actually seemed to sense the rain before it hit. Then, when the drops landed, panic ripped through them as they shrieked in shock. Then their rage finally exploded. Tatsuya spotted the birds barreling toward them, and Susu snapped that she'd handle the rest. She was sure the rain had worn the birds down. The girl sprinted toward the angry birds, while those furious birds came charging straight at her. Rage ripped through them, and they screamed at the top of their lungs. Susu halted mid-stride, rain drenched her to the bone, and a sticky tide of sauce streamed down her legs and soaked through her clothes. The girl slammed the brakes and got ready for whatever was coming. Tatsuya stared in shock, because that stance felt way too familiar. Rage burned in the angry bird as it charged straight at Susu, who snapped her fist forward for a crushing hit. The girl drove a brutal punch straight into the bird, and a violent shockwave ripped through the air. After a while, Suzu wiped out every last popo bird, stared them down, then brushed the dust off her hands, like the moment she muttered, "6 will be enough." The whole fight was already over. Susu spun the boy around and blurted, "Get them out of here!" all fired up. Tatsuya shot back, "Don't worry, when we're back, I'll cook you something." The girl was still soaked in a storm of sauce, and sure, she wanted to bolt the second she could, but she ended up staying late anyway. In the woods, she spotted something strange. Susu cracked the details and said there was a pond nearby so she could wash up. The water's surface shimmered under the light, and the boy sat on the shore, lost in thoughts of the girl bathing in the waves. The girl dumped her gear right beside him. Then Susu stepped into the water until it reached her waist, and in a heartbeat her clothes and hair got soaked all over again. Tatsuya grinned at the girl, stunned by how beautiful she looked. Then Suzu whipped around and stared off into the distance. The girl blurted his name at full volume, snapping him out of his own head, and Tatsuya answered with a confused, "What?" In the blink of an eye, Susu was right beside the boy. She slammed him to the ground, then spun around like she was hunting danger. Tatsuya felt mortified by the girl's actions, and his face went bright red. Then Susu stepped in and said it was fine since it was just a goblin. The girl spun her gaze from the monster lurking behind the bushes to the boy, apologized, and asked if he was okay. Tatsuya sprawled on the grass, drenched in red, staring up at the girl pinning him, and Suzu suddenly shouted his name. After a while, they stumbled back into the city. Songbirds were blasting their melodies, and Susu's ears twitched like they couldn't help it. The girl shot her hand up, spun to her sister, and blurted the news, "I'm at home!" Tatsuya watched her beam with that kind smile and couldn't help thinking, wow, she's so full of positivity. Lin Bell stared at her sister as she came back, then broke into a smile. She greeted me and said the girl returned sooner than anyone expected. Lin Bell pestered Suzu about how it went, then told Tatsuyama and she quizzed Suzu if she'd been good, and Suzu shot back that a weirdo's still a weirdo, yet they pulled off the task perfectly. Tatsuya huffed with a pout, because deep down he was still the same weirdo, and Suzu's opinion of him hadn't shifted one bit. Lin Bell slammed a bag onto the table and said the words made it their reward. Then she grinned and swore the girl would go straight to Mr. Volga and beg him to carve up the loot. Suzu finally made a sharp little move and turned to her sister, only to see her stare back, utterly confused. The girl pressed her hand to her mouth and hissed a secret into Lin Bell's ear. Then Lin Bell looked up at her, while Susu gave a quick, decisive nod. Lin Bell blurted out that he'd seen a bunch of popo chickens, full-on staring in shock into the light, and Susu snapped back, "Yep, and there were up to 6 of them." The girl's hands shook as she asked, "Wait, are we really getting popo chickens for dinner tonight?" The boy nodded hard and said yes, and then Lin Bell pushed again, asking if her own plate would be made the same way. Tatsuya answered with the same blunt yes.
The girl blurted out, all fired up, that everyone should keep up the good work, and that one shout immediately hooked the other girls, making them lean in to see what was going on. A little while later, they blinked, and suddenly they were standing in a whole new place. Wolf froze with his jaw hanging open, staring in disbelief at what was right in front of him. Dozens of massive, hulking popo birds sprawled across the table, while Tatsuya and Susu stood nearby like they had just pulled the impossible off. The girl asked the man to pluck the birds, and he snapped back that she'd been gone for ages. He blurts out that it all comes down to these chickens, then starts badgering the girl to sell them to the guild, ideally at wholesale, until Susu snaps back, refusing flat because she can't even get food for herself at home. That rejection shattered the man's heart, and Tatsuya just stood there, watching it all in deadly silence. The boy wheeled around and offered the girl a share, 10 kilograms each, promising it'd be plenty to whip up a mouth-watering dish. And the moment those words hit, her ears perked up like a hook had snapped her attention. She nodded with total confidence to Mr. Volga, promising him 10 whole kilograms. Then the man snapped back in shock, asking if she was seriously kidding. Suzu and the man started grilling each other about something right away, while Tatsuya just stood there thinking everyone in this place was completely obsessed with chickens. After that, the guys sprinted back to their girls' place. Susu slipped into her home clothes and headed out to the side. She yawned hard, slapping a hand over her mouth like she couldn't help it. Then she asked, "Is the food ready yet?" And Tatsuya grinned and said, "Not yet, I'm not done." Then he dove right into the rest of the ingredients. The boy spun Asusa toward him and told her to finally rest, because she hadn't been sleeping right lately. Then the girl only mumbled back, half awake. She shoved up from the chair she'd been glued to and strode to the other side of the table. Right beside her, a small blanket sat on the floor, and in a flash, the girl dropped onto it and shut her eyes tight. Susu tucked herself into a tight curl and dropped into a deep sleep in seconds. Tatsuya spotted Susa passed out on the floor as he walked by, then stepped in close, crouched down, and gently tucked her in with a blanket so she'd finally get warm. With that sly smile, he realized she was wiped out, so tired she could barely hold her eyes open, and Tatsuya just wanted to keep watching her sleep like this forever. Then the boy dashed back to the kitchen and kept cooking up chicken popo, while Tatsuya finally leaned in thinking, "Cut the meat smaller first." And then he jumped straight into it. Then he started tossing meat into a mix of soy sauce and ginger, and he made sure to throw in whatever was fresh for the season, because that meat had to soak up every flavor and be marinated all the way through. Next, you wrap those seasonal veggies and pickled meat in a coat of flour, then roll them through crunchy breadcrumbs. Now toss them into that deep fry pan and crank it to a blazing 180 degrees, because Tatsuya suddenly realized he hadn't deep-fried a thing in ages. He carefully lifted a tiny bite of fried meat with long sticks dripping with scorching oil. While Susu dozed off, a mouth-watering scent hit the air, and her ears twitched instantly. The girl hauled herself off the floor, eyes half-lidded with sleep. Then a spurt of saliva started coming out, so she swallowed it with a loud, embarrassed gulp. Tatsuya gripped a huge plate piled with fried popo bird meat, then immediately decided that once it hit the fryer, it deserved to be dumped into a wide bowl. Suddenly, a hungry Susu popped around the corner, staring at the boy like she'd been waiting all along. Tatsuya froze, because the girl was already awake. He marched up to Susa and demanded to know if she was all right. Then she told him that while she'd been asleep, the taste of fried meat kept lingering in her mouth, and Tatsuya's jaw dropped in horror as he asked, "Are you drooling?" Then Susu shot out that she was going to grab her sister, and the boy nodded right away, because the time had finally come. Suzu skipped outside, humming like she owned the world, and Tatsuya just watched her burst out with unstoppable excitement. He headed back to the house and weighed his next move. Maybe business could wait, maybe not, then grabbed a tablecloth and threw it over the table like he was setting the stage. The boy cranked up the stove, set a kettle of water on it, and piled on a big batch of fresh-baked bread. Tatsuya shoved his chair back, sure as day, and thought,
It's all set. Now, he just had to wait for the girls to show up. He'd already cooked the meal, so he sat there waiting for the sisters to come back and slide into their seats at the table. Then it hit him hard. These girls weren't strangers at all. They felt just like family. Suzu's singing drifted through the air, and the girls burst into the house, laughing and holding hands. Then Lin Bell shouted that they were back. Meanwhile, Tatsuya stared in shock, because Suzu had only just stepped out of the house a moment ago. The boy ordered the girls to scrub their hands down to the last bit of grime. Then the girls nodded and promised they'd do it. Then they dropped into their seats at the table, and Lin Bell and Suzu stared at the boy with eyes blazing as he promised, "It's all set now." Right after that, Tatsuya grinned and shoved a huge bowl onto the table, and in it, fried chicken and tempura, ready for the girls to dig in. Lin Bell and Suzy went still, eyes locked on the food in front of them, because the boy told them to eat up, and if they wanted, there was even a supplement waiting for them. The girls stared at the fried meat, completely baffled, like, what were they even supposed to do? And what were they supposed to say? Tatsuya's stomach dropped with worry. Those girls still hadn't rushed to the food, and that scared him, so he hurriedly asked if something was wrong. Suzu snapped out the words, "It's impossible," and the boy froze, utterly baffled. The girl told the adventurer, "My gut says the moment I taste this dish, I'll never be able to enjoy anything else again." Lin Bell shook all over, stared at the meat, and blurted that it tasted even better than it looked. Totally dangerous to say out loud, right? Tatsuya's awkward words came next as he added, straight-faced, "We ate it," and then admitted they weren't shy about it at all. Suzu lifted a tiny bite of crispy fried chicken with chopsticks and stared at it like it was the tastiest thing in the world. She dove in and started devouring it, and her eyes lit up like fireworks with pure hunger. She was completely lost in every bite. Lin Bell copied her sister's move, then gently pinched up a tiny chunk of chicken with her chopsticks. The girl jumped in and eagerly took bites of the new dish the boy was offering. The girls chewed through the meat in sync, like it was some kind of challenge they had already agreed on. Suzu snapped her gaze upward and shut her eyes, and silent tears spilled out, sending the boy into a full panic. Lin Bell slammed both hands on the table and let her head drop onto them. Tatsuya grabbed her attention, calling out, "Hey, what happened to you?" With her eyes shut tight, Suzu whispered that fried chicken would never taste the same for her again. Lin Bell snapped back that she was calling every shot. Then she announced she was moving in for fried chicken, and Tatsuya couldn't stop wondering what he should do, because the girl's emotions were getting way too out of control. The sisters raved that the chicken came out with a dense, golden crust, crackling outside, buttery soft inside, so juicy that every bite sent the juices slipping out, and they swear it was the absolute best fried chicken. Tatsuya froze, staring at the empty bowl, then blurted, "Does anyone want more?" The girl got shouted at, like they both wanted the same thing, while Tatsuya could only think he'd finally found his way straight into the sister's stomach. Someone sprinted down the road, gasping like every step was stealing their breath. The man stormed up to the guildmaster and shouted that trouble was here. Then he blurted fast and frantic, "What happened?" The messenger shot back that an army of orcs had erupted into the world, and that they were headed straight for Frisia, leaving the man staggered with pure shock. The guildmaster practically laughed and said the orcs could wipe out the entire city, and the crisis was already charging toward them. Suzu slid into the chair and tried to figure out why it hit her so recently. Something weird was happening to her, and it was only getting stronger. She snapped back on her own words in an instant, because she'd known the whole truth from the very start. Her movements suddenly flowed with ease, and at the same time, her strength kept surging higher. She realized it. She wasn't getting tired as often anymore, and it only happened when she ate the food the boy cooked for her. She tore into fried chicken, still dragging a little from exhaustion, but the moment she tasted it, the food started clawing her energy back. Suzu stared at the boy, sensing he might have some secret skill, but he never once admitted a thing. She snapped out of her own thoughts. What was she even thinking?
because she was totally locked in on eating that chicken. Tatsuya clocked it instantly and shot, "Everything okay? Like, did that chicken get burnt somewhere?" Tuzu waved it off and said, "I just suddenly thought his cooking tastes way too good," then leaned in and asked what he was throwing in there, like what seasonings he used. Tatsuya blinked, totally thrown off by the question. He froze on the spot, not sure what to say, and Lin Bell burst out shouting at him to answer. Tatsuya was sure he'd cooked up his own skill-born spices from scratch and mixed them into the food, but the real punchline was he had no clue how the girl would react, so he swallowed his nerves and just said it was nothing special, just ordinary spices from this bizarre world. Susu muttered under her breath, her mind racing as she judged the boy's face as painfully suspicious. The very next day, they burst outside like something was about to explode. Susu blurted that the whole city had lost its mind today, and Tatsuya nodded right away because the streets were packed with way too many people. The boy suddenly caught something. He spotted a mass of people and realized it looked like the entire crowd had gathered at the guild. They heard a sudden, urgent evacuation message, and it left everyone baffled. The whole city was emptying and people were panicking because their businesses were getting wiped out by the chaos. The man blared out the same repeated words again and again, as if he had to convince the world that this was the point and nothing else. He told everyone that the guildmaster's orders were clear. Every resident had to flee the city right now, and this wasn't some practice run. The evacuation was screamingly urgent. Tatsuya froze in shock as the announcement blared. He couldn't wrap his head around an emergency evacuation sweeping the whole city, and then someone suddenly called him out. Susu darted her eyes around and muttered the words that made it sound like her sister had a clue, then told Tatsuya they were heading to the guild. He stared in shock, but still nodded and went along, while everyone behind them was getting the evacuation explained to them. Lin Bell spun around, nerves rattling in her chest, and froze in shock. Then she let out a worried sigh and snapped, "Where'd the guys go?" She marched up to Suzu and Tatsuya, and Suzu immediately pressed her sister. "Tell me, did something serious really happen?" Lin Bell ducked her head, couldn't hide her excitement, and told them she only learned everything that very morning, too. She burst into the room and told the guys that a massive army of orcs was marching straight for the city, and the guys couldn't believe it. Lin Bell told them that if they wanted the full details, they should ask the guildmaster, because right now he's summoning every guild member for an urgent meeting. The guys nodded and said, "Got it." The guildmaster stared everyone down and finally called for all of them to gather. Then he snapped that this was urgent, and the men swore they wouldn't say it twice, so everyone better lock in and listen. Tatsuya and Suzu slipped in to listen to the man, and the boy couldn't stop thinking, who were these two lurking behind the guildmaster's backs? The man said, "North of the city, a day's travel out, there's a tiny settlement." Then he added, "We just got word 10 days ago about 100 orcs hit that place." The guild's head snapped that everything was critical, then urgently sent word to the capital guild for reinforcements. The man said the guild shot a response in minutes, and now they're standing right in front of the call, where he points out the nearby squad, the strongest A-class adventurers they've got, the immortal birds. Tatsuya stared at them, and the second he saw them, he knew, just standing there, they screamed that they were way stronger than most of the others. The guild leader went on to say that when they finally hit the marked spot, everything went sideways. Then he whipped around to see who was beside him, and that's when the guy's meaning instantly clicked. He introduced himself as Karu from the Immortal Bird Squad, and said they swept into the settlement the moment their guildmaster's message hit. But once they finally got into position, they couldn't pull off the job. The whole city erupted into questions, demanding to know why it happened. Then Kairu fell silent for a beat. Then he leaned in and told me the message was for an army of 100 orcs, only to reveal it was way worse, because there were over 300 of them. Everyone in town gasped at the bombshell they just heard. Pyru said that a bunch of them didn't even look like normal members of their species, and they all shared these unmistakable signature traits. He said, We can't pull this off alone. And that's when they hit the city, rushing in to report what they found. Tatsuya and Susu stood frozen, staring ahead in stunned silence. The guild's boss said that once the immortal birds came back with the full report, they instantly dispatched their strongest soldiers to back them up. The man snapped that the second they came back with reinforcements, there were already 500 orcs waiting. He said they weren't just headed for their city. Those orcs were closing in fast enough that they had to slam the brakes and declare a state of emergency, because by their calculations, the orcs would hit the city in about 6 to 7 hours. The guild's leader grimly warned that by evening this city would be nothing but ruins. And yeah, the orcs are almost certainly gearing up to move in. Tatsuya and Suzu froze in disbelief. There was no way that kid could accept a city getting wiped out, and everyone was totally helpless because they'd never seen anything like this, especially not with so many orcs pouring in. The man ordered that every resident would be yanked out and evacuated to a village west of the city. He swore reinforcements already left the capital, but he didn't think they'd reach the city in time because the orc army is going to slam into the gates way earlier. He told me in plain terms what he was planning to do next. He said every member of the guild of Franksea would become bait, luring the enemies off their path and herding them straight to the exact spot they'd agreed on. 2 squads, both rank B and up, are waiting right there, and once they strike together, the orcs trapped in the ring get hit from 2 sides and completely lose control, caught completely off guard. The guild's leader admitted, straight up, they weren't about to wipe them out completely, but they'd hit their ranks hard and buy time until help finally showed up. They fell silent as the man laid out the plan, then dropped the bombshell. Right now, most of their guild is stacked with fresh newcomers who don't have the experience yet. Even so, he demanded they stop the orcs from wrecking their homes, no exceptions. Then he laid out the plan. All they needed was adventurers, and he scanned the crowd, shouting for anyone ready to fight to raise their hand. Chaos erupted in the crowd, and the adventurers froze with fear. One guy even trembled and swore he wasn't going. People started whispering that only Class A can handle missions this massive, and here they had nothing but ranks C and D. The guy sitting beside the boys leaned in and swore there were only a handful of brave men left in the city, men crazy enough to stand up to the orcs. Tatsui remembered fighting 3 orcs before, but now it was about 500, and even if he charged in to fight, those beasts would chew through him without breaking a sweat. Suddenly a confident guy shot his hand up, then Susu blurted out she was ready, and it completely stunned the boy who'd just called her name. Susie told everyone that Phrygia is her hometown, where she was born, and when she said she was adventuring with the class, she made it clear she wouldn't let those orcs trash her house. The girl spoke up with total confidence, swearing that because of him, she would fight to the end. The other adventurers stared at that girl, totally baffled. They took turns loudly swearing, "We're the ones who'll go, because they ran this city, and they wouldn't hand it over to those enemies for a second, not when they were ready to fight tooth and nail to protect it." The guildmaster stared at the crowd in total disbelief. His jaw dropped when Susu and the rest shot back with an answer. Suddenly Tatsuya blurted out the girl's name and told her he'd join the battle too, and the girl stared back at him, dead serious. After that, she snapped back that she'd never let him go, and it totally threw the boy for a loop. The girl snapped out that Tatsuya was an E-rank weakling, and it hit the boy like a knife. He clenched his fist, snapped that all he wanted was to protect that girl, and admitted there was something he'd claim the moment the battle finally ended. He spit out the words, like a gamble, that maybe she'd finally cave and join his team. Total silence slammed the room, and every shocked pair of eyes snapped to the boy, who looked utterly lost. Tatsuya couldn't help but think, with pure awkward dread, that from the outside it looked exactly like a marriage proposal. Susu's cheeks flared at his words, but she steadied herself and nodded. Then she warned him not to risk his life. Tatsuya didn't just listen. He nodded and fully agreed with what the girl said. Right then, the guildmaster shot him a surprise call and motioned the boy over for a quick word. Tatsuya closed in, and the man snapped that the boy was way too green and untested,
like he should have been handed some safer, less dangerous job.
The man then blurted out words that made him sound certain the boy had a special power, one that would help him survive the battle against the orcs. The guildmaster leaned in and warned the boy, "Don't pull something stupid." Then he slammed his hand onto Tatsuya's shoulder, and Suzu just froze, watching in stunned silence. The man snapped back to the adventurer and barked that there was zero time to waste. Carts were already waiting for them at the north gate, and anyone ready to throw down needed to move there right now. Tatsuya and Suzu took off. So fast, the boy kept thinking that yesterday's fried chicken dinner must have been some perfect dream. But when Tatsuya looked over, Suzu was deadly quiet, and he snapped, "Hey, what's wrong?" The boy fired off the exact words. She knew he was always hunting for the right moment. He pressed the girl for answers, joked that maybe she just wanted a cookie, and then Suzu went completely silent. Then, out of nowhere, she stormed toward the boy, and he just sat there thinking she'd probably be hungry already. Suddenly, Suzu darted up to Tatsuya. His eyes went wide, and before he could react, she threw her arms around him fast. He just froze there, stunned.